We at the Least Haunted Podcast stand with those of the LGBTQIA+ community and especially want to voice our support for the trans community, masculine, feminine, non-binary, and every other of the beautiful assortment of people who are going through so much vitriol and hate in these difficult times.
We welcome you to join our friendly and supportive Discord, and if you want to help support the community or need help yourself, we fully endorse the Trans Lifeline at translifeline.org. We can get through this together.
You are all deserving of life and love, and remember,
the world is more beautiful with you in it.
Salut, ceci est un message d'entraide publique. Le monsieur qui s'apprête à parler ne comprend pas le français et n'a aucune facilité de prononciation. C'est un imbécile avec une tête carrée.
Hello, dig for bones.
Hello, and welcome to the Least Haunted Podcast, a place where science, skepticism, humor, and anthropology meet to discuss all things spooky, haunting, supernatural, and sometimes just the plain ridiculous. I'm your host, Cody Franks, and our usual almost always co-host is out on assignment again, this time collecting samples from a UFO crash site in the Southwest. So instead, joining me this time is forging the fields of France and finding facts of ferocious and fearsome, frightfully fanged fantastical fiends, braving boldly the belligerent big biting beasts brain bouncing around gnarled and gnawed gravestones and gardens in the greater Gevaudan.
Carolyn! Hi guys! I'm back again!
And thanks to Ken.
Oh, Ken came up with that one? Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I got my own Monacan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Monacan. Yeah, that's Ken, that's your new title. You're the Monacan.
Mm-hmm. With two
With
N's.
two N's.
Has to be with two N's. It's important.
You're a return guest. This is like your third time?
Yes, this is my third time being like the guest Bert, but I've been voices for a bunch of the radio plays. So,
yes.
Yeah, so this is my third time acting as somebody who has knowledge on something, which can only mean we're talking about animals.
Yes. And I'm super glad that you're here with me today for this one because I have a brand new piece of Least Haunted tech that we're going to experiment with today. You know, from the laboratory that brought you the backwards carousel of time, and I'm sure there's another one I'm forgetting, but that's the most noteworthy.
I'm sure I will figure out a way to use it, break it, and fix it.
Okay, so you're familiar, of course, with the kaleidoscope, yes?
Yeah. It's
Okay.
shiny, it's pretty, it makes cool colors.
What? A kaleidoscope? I'm not five. Shapes and colors the likes of which I've never seen.
We like it.
It was invented by Scottish scientist David Brewster in 1817 and uses angled mirrors, a minimum of 2, to create beautiful abstract pictures by refracting brightly colored objects that are housed in a compartment at the end of a tube. The name is from the Greek, kalos, meaning beauty, eidos, meaning form or shape, and scopio, meaning to examine. So it occurred to me that many of the legends that we cover on Least Haunted are a lot like kaleidoscopic images that have been distorted and refracted over time and retelling to become a whole new image that is unrecognizable from the component pieces that make up the whole. So what I did is I reversed the process. I made a reverse kaleidoscope. Do you know what the opposite word in Greek is for kalos or beauty?
I'm guessing it'd be ugly. But I don't know the word exactly.
It actually is the basis for a name that people have. Agathos.
Oh.
Agathos means unpleasing or ugly. So I'm sincerely sorry to all the Agathas out there in the world, but the name Agatha is derived from the Greek word for ugly or unpleasing.
Don't worry, girls. I love you.
It was Agatha all along.
Yeah, and I still love you. I support women's rights and women's wrongs. Be villainous.
I think it's a great name. But so anyway, based off that, the new device, I present to you the agathidoscope, which it takes the kaleidoscopic image and then it condenses it down and removes the refraction, and we get the ugly, ugly truth.
I like it. I mean, as we can all know in science, everything is both ugly and hairy up close.
Yes. But from far away, it's wondrous,
Uh-huh.
amazing, beautiful. I mean, it's the same thing up close sometimes. So we're going to test out the new Least Haunted Agathidoscope, TM.
TM TM.
We're going to look at a favorite historical cryptid of mine, or cryptid mystery, I should say. Today we're going to deconstruct the legend and image of the Beast of Gevaudan. Carolyn, I already know the answer, but for the audience's sake, have you heard of the Beast of Gevaudan?
I have heard of the Beast of Gevaudan, and part of the reason I know about the Beast of Gevaudan is from a notable puppet who teaches history on YouTube. And while I think that puppet does a good job, I think I think our own puppet named Cody does a lot better. Our own history puppet Cody.
Yeah, no, what did it say, like, is the right word aspersion? I don't know why that word popped in my head.
No shade.
No shade being thrown on this other learned puppet and the institution that they
yes.
represent and work from. But yeah, we're gonna really get into the nitty gritty with this one.
I think at least Haunted, you're just a little bit more comfortable falling down all of the different mongoose holes.
Yeah.
And no one tells you to stop. And I'm just gonna out myself and say that we were supposed to technically record this last week, and then you
Yes.
found a book, and I got that book for you.
Yeah, as so often is the case, it's like right before record time, something pops up where I'm like, well, I need to look at that. And in this case, yeah, it was so the full book is over close to 400 pages, but the last like 100 and some odd pages of the book are just citations.
Oh yeah,
Which
that's a good book. That means that's a good book.
The name of the book was Monsters of the Gevaudan, The Making of a Beast by J.M. Smith.
Yep.
And yeah, and oh boy. I thought I knew about it before, because like the first time I read about this the beast was in Cryptozoology A to Z, and then again I saw the of course this puppet.
Mm-hmm.
The steamed puppet that we've mentioned, and a film that I watched in the early 2000s that was made about it. And I forced you to watch the movie, and we're going to talk about that as a Polterbites. So everybody get ready for that one.
Y'all are not ready for that Polterbites. I have a lot of thoughts. I took notes. They aren't detailed notes, but I took notes.
So, what are we looking at? What's the image here? What is this beast? Well, I'm going to tell you all about it, and we're going to start by placing an image in the agathidoscope. And this image is a first-person account from somebody who survived an attack from this creature. It's not the only description we're going to go over, but this is like one of the most detailed. Here we go. And I'm not going to affect a French accent for this because I don't want to offend people. It's going to be atrocious enough as I try to pronounce the names of places and people in the story. So that's enough.
that's true. There's so many extra like vowels and consonants in French that it's just hard to keep them straight in your head.
Dude, there's a guy, no joke, his name is like 6 words long with hyphens between everything. I'm like,
French, why you gotta be like this?
But his friends just called him Paul. Anyway,
and we will too.
This is from, as I said, a survivor of an attack by the beast in 1765. This animal is about the size of a year-old bull. Its neck and belly are white. The fur of its body is red in the length of that of a wolf. It has a black stripe running down its back with very long fur, longer than the rest of the coat. The tail resembles that of a horse, red and bushy, with touches of black. The paws are very powerful, with 6 talons, each the length of a finger. The head is black, with a wide forehead. The eyes are large and sparkling. And its muzzle is the length of that of a pig, with the difference that the muzzle points down instead of up. Its mouth is extraordinarily broad, measuring at least a foot. The teeth are wide and pointy at the end, with a half-inch gap separating one from the other. The ears are straight and roughly the length of those of a wolf. So this is the beast, but why is it so beastly? We'll get into that. Because we have to adjust the scope, you twist it around.
I'm also gonna say, as somebody who I haven't been attacked by things. I've been bitten by a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of conflate things when you get the adrenaline pumping and you're like, oh my god, that was so scary, it was so big, and in reality it was a very pissed off house cat that decided to take a chunk out of your hand.
Yeah, in this case, this description actually comes like late in the sequence of events, and so this image has already been affected by other people's personal sightings and accounts as well.
Oh.
And the person who is relaying this description, we're going to meet them later, they have ulterior motives as well.
Oh, okay. So we're not getting like the first appearance of the chupacabra in Puerto Rico, where it was clearly, if you like trace it back, it was species.
Yeah.
Species done infected the chupacabra in Puerto Rico.
Yeah. So this whole story, that's why it's a kaleidoscopic image. We're going to find that there's so many a lot of ins and outs.
a lot of what have yous.
A lot of keep straight in the old duder's head.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, now we're going to set the stage. This story will take us to a world that does not exist anymore. And by that I mean the location, being the pre-revolutionary region of France known at the time as the Gevaudan, has changed its name. It is now a completely different province/administrational region. Today it's called the Lozère department, because after the French Revolution, they basically changed everything about how France was structured. And so provinces don't exist anymore, and there's new provinces, and names changed. Also, as I just kind of implied, this story takes place within the last few decades of the French monarchy, specifically the years 1764 and 1765, with a little bleed over into 1767, but just a little bit.
French Revolution was 1789. Yeah, okay. I was like, it's definitely, I couldn't remember if it was like late 1780s or early 1790s, because I know it was like closely right after the U.S. Revolution, since we quote unquote inspired them.
Yeah. The revolution is like 1789. The revolution itself isn't super long. What comes after is a period known as the Terror. So when we think of most of like people getting their heads lopped off by the guillotine, yes, that was going on during the revolution, but then like basically the fire just spread and people got real weird and crazy with it. A little bit like verging on the killing fields of the Khmer Rouge, where it's like, if you wore glasses, that was a sign of that you were like part of the intelligentsia, and so you need to die.
Oofa
and
doofa.
so, in fact, a lot of the people who survived this story in the nobility would get their heads cut off during the Revolution of the Terror.
Yeah, we're good. We'll get into more of that because like you provided me some context for the movie, but yeah.
Yeah, so it's always context. It's all context.
The context is key.
Yes. So the Gevaudan is a landlocked region in south-central France. It's made up mostly of a large mountainous plateau with an average elevation of around 4,000 feet or 1,219 meters. So it's really it's high up. It's a land of deep ravines and gullies. There's a lot of streams and rivers and bogs. Any like area that is kind of open or flat is pretty soggy and saturated with water.
Oof.
At the time of our story, only about 12% of that land was suitable for farming. The very poor and malnourished peasants relied heavily on animal husbandry in the form of sheep herding and small-scale bovine-based dairy to survive. They actually took work in certain times of the year where sheep from the lower elevations would move up there in the summer. And so they would get like seasonal work watching other people's sheep, which also means that certain times of the year, the population of sheep increases. That might attract some predators. So just put a little note in
there. Yeah, lambing season is usually
early spring.
I mean, sometimes it happens like late winter, which that's always like very scary. But typically it's like early spring to like early summer is like your typical lambing season. And yeah, there's lots of goop out there.
Yeah, a lot of nice smells on the air to attract somebody. It's said that everybody in the Gevaudan knows how to weave. This is kind of the quote was like dismissive by a nobleman who's like, "Oh, it's a region of spinners and weavers." But this is actually somewhat true, since every household tries to supplement its non-existent income with literal cottage industries, because they live in cottages, and so they everybody tries to supplement that by homespun wool crafts and making their own clothing, and then making cloth that they can then sell, or that has to be given to the local noble, because this is still pretty much feudalism with extra steps. Amongst the hills and bogs, there's large boulder fields of erratics, which are like giant stones left over from glaciers during the Ice Age. Which provides a lot of places for predators to hide in natural caves and boulder fields. Thinking back to our missing 411 episode, we have running water.
Oh, God.
We have we have boulder fields. Oh no, is it connected?
No, it's not.
The population density is very low. There's like several dozen small towns and villages in the region, but they're typically made up of only 3 to 4 families each. Or in the rare exception of a larger town, the population barely passes 2,000 people living in like what would pass as a town or city for the region. It's actually one of the least populated provinces in all of France at the time. It's very wild. And because this is still the monarchy, what the peasants can and can't do is highly regulated and restricted by social customs and norms. For example, they are forbidden by law to hunt in order to supplement their diet.
Yeah.
Because wild game is reserved, quote, purely for the pleasure of the nobility and the upper classes who can appreciate it.
Which
So this...
just...
Yeah, go ahead.
It's pretty common with like different monarchies like across the globe that quote unquote the wild game belongs to the king.
Yes.
And
this has gone on since, antiquity.
Yeah, and it really just opens up your peasantry to like starving, and also really, what makes people I said it yesterday, they get hangry.
Yes.
starving peasants are more likely to want to come and like chop your heads off. So let's not starve the peasants.
Terry Pratchett had said in one of his books, and he's probably paraphrasing somebody else or maybe satirizing somebody else, but the idea that society is just 3 warm meals away from chaos. It's like, just deprive people of food for enough time. And yeah.
I mean, it's true.
Get ready for those empty shelves when the tariffs really hit America.
No,
it's coming.
It's fine. You don't need 30 dolls. You don't need to buy your child 30... Sorry, I just watched a video about that. And
Oh, yeah. Little girls only need 5 pencils tops. Why would a girl need more than 5 pencils? What's she writing about?
I'm just going to say this as somebody who is related to a lot of teachers. The teachers in my family actually do a lot of their supplies purchasing and also try and get as many donations as possible to their classrooms. And hey, that's fucked. It's so trash. It's so trash.
Yeah. Oh, no, yeah. My wife works in education as well. And yeah, it's awful. But back to the story, though. Because they can't hunt, besides making them very hungry, this also means that the peasantry are forbidden from having firearms and weaponry. So that's like a double reason for why they don't let the peasants hunt. It's because we don't want them to have weapons that they can turn on us. What this does mean, though, is that their defensive weaponry is particularly medieval. It's derived from common farming implements or bayonets, blades that they affix to the end of wooden sticks, which are usually the handles to their farming implements. The winters are cold, miserable, and wet with heavy and frequent snowstorms and rain. The summers are hot, humid, miserable, and wet with frequent rainstorms as well.
Oof.
Basically, the Gevaudan is a really shitty place to be a peasant. In the 1760s is a really shitty time to be a peasant in the Gevaudan. And as we're about to find out, it's going to get much worse.
It also, just from the description of like the surrounding landscape, it sounds like they're like whatever they could grow was like they'd probably have very low crop yields, and also there would be some amount of just it's like certain items just could not grow because it wouldn't be able to survive being very, very cold or just being absolutely waterlogged.
Something that probably would have been very useful to grow in these conditions, if they could drain some of the soil, would be something like a potato. But, side note, potatoes were not well received in France in particular, with the clergy kind of denouncing them as something bad. And so a crop that could have really helped feed the peasantry was like forbidden, or at least demonized. And so, yeah, that kind of adds to the food scarcity, but they probably could have really benefited from potatoes.
Yep.
Instead, they're trying to grow wheat and barley, and then a majority of that they are able to grow on that less than 12% of land that they can farm is then has to be paid to the nobility higher up. Yeah, it's a terrible place. Although I have to say, besides just that though, like that aside, the Gevaudan is breathtakingly gorgeous.
Oh,
like
it sounds like it would be very beautiful, but sorry, I am hung up on the fact that the church is like, not potatoes. Potatoes will make you too horny.
Don't grow the devil apples.
Don't grow potatoes.
Because those were developed by the heathens in the New World, who, are in league with the devil. They're pagans. And so anything that comes from them, although they're still growing, they do accept other New World crops, which is kind of weird, like pumpkins, for example.
And tomatoes?
Yeah. Well, tomatoes and potatoes, besides just rhyming, they're also parts of the nightshade family.
Yeah.
So a lot of people just thought that they were poisonous. Although when they first were introduced, they did kind of catch on as a fad amongst nobility. However, the fad was like for all thing potato. And so I'm trying to remember who it was. Famously, a noblewoman planned an entire like dinner meal where every dish was made out of parts of potato, including the potato leaf salad. Hey, everybody, don't eat potato leaves. They're toxic.
Yeah, they're super toxic. It's also part of the reason why you need to, like, cook potatoes, is because eating a raw potato, like, it doesn't have the same amount of, like, toxicity. Also, hey, fun fact, as soon as you cut a potato, it has to go into water because it will oxidize and, like, make it, I do believe it, like, makes it also toxic.
Yeah, it's a type of acid that is prevalent in there, as well as, like, if the potato was green, don't eat the green potatoes. But potatoes will start to turn green when exposed to light, because, they grow underground, which is why most people keep their potatoes in, like, a dark drawer or box, because once they're sitting on the shelf in the bright store lights, they start to produce this, Anyway.
Okay, sorry.
But what happens is when you have the nobility all getting together for a well-publicized dinner of potato, and then a bunch of them get sick afterwards, that doesn't help the potato's reputation anymore. So,
wow.
Yeah. Okay, so 1763 is a particularly hard year for France. That's because there's this thing called the 7 Years' War. Hey, you guys ever seen that movie, The Last of the Mohicans? That's a good movie with Daniel Day-Lewis. Yeah, that's about the 7 Years' War. Remember in that movie, the bad guys are the French who have allied with certain Native American tribes. Yeah, well, the French lose because, as Last of the Mohicans told us, they're the bad guys, and the bad guys always lose, don't they? So they lose the 7 Years' War. And as a consequence, they lose all their territory in North America in this thing called the Treaty of Paris, which happens in 1763, which when I read that, I was like, wait a minute. I thought we purchased Louisiana from the French, didn't we? But apparently in 1763, all of the Louisiana territory was ceded to Spain, who was an ally of France, and it was given to them as a compensation for all of the monetary and human loss that Spain had accrued backing up France. So how is it that they give it to Spain and yet later they sell it to the United States? That's kind of weird, right? And it's because Spain gives it back to Napoleon later as a way of saying, like, don't invade us, bro. Like, hey, Napoleon, you're like conquering Europe. We're cool, right? Here, have Louisiana back. And Napoleon's like, thanks. And then immediately he turns around the very next year in 1804 and says, hey, America, you want to buy all this land, including stuff that, like, is Spanish interest?
I
and
mean,
we're like, Yeah.
Like make money.
Merci beaucoup. Yeah. So that's how Louisiana briefly went from France to Spain, back to France, and then became American.
So interesting.
Yeah, and when this treaty of 1763, the Paris Treaty happens, the king throws a huge celebration with this massive fireworks display and tries to spin it as a victory, even though they were losing all that territory. He's like, no, see, we're celebrating peace, right? We all like peace. Yay, we did it.
We don't have all this
did it.
territory anymore, so we're saving money.
Yeah, we won. That sounds kind of familiar to things happening today, right? When you like lose pretty noticeably and then you try to spin it into a win.
Okay, we have to stop. We have to stop bringing it back around to American politics. That's a lie. We're going to keep doing it.
Okay, then June 30th, 1764. We're finally getting to the meat and not potatoes of the situation. And not even meat, because the people can't even eat meat. 14-year-old Jeanne Boulet is tending her flock near the town of Langon in the eastern part of Gevaudan. The job of watching the sheep fell mostly to children and young women, because the men were doing what little farming they could, or they're caught up in other manufacturing things. So that job is given to women and children. And because the land was so inhospitable, as we have mentioned, the actual grazing areas, or places where the sheep could find food, are pretty far from the villages. And so they actually have to travel away from other people. So now they're even more exposed. Not that there's a lot of people to begin with. We will never know exactly what happened here, but what we do know for sure is that Jeanne was brutally killed and partly devoured by some sort of animal. Owing to Catholic customs of the area at the time, she was buried without sacrament since she was unable to give final confession before her death, which I think is just a big pile of bullshit. That they won't let her be buried in the church because she didn't get to confess before she was devoured by some kind of monster.
Okay.
Insult to injury? Yes.
What?
Oh yeah, as you find out, there's also we're gonna get into like religious aspects later. There's a lot of religious customs that are buck wild in this story.
This is why certain religious aspects make no sense to me. Like, hey, what about all the soldiers that just die, like not at home, like or near a priest?
They get into heaven because they died in service of the king, and the king is a representative of divine right on earth. Therefore they're covered. But this young girl who was tending a flock, something that like is a pretty big metaphor in Christianity, the idea of this shepherd and flock relationship, is killed in the line of duty of tending said flock. No, they don't get any special compensation or, consideration.
The rules are made up and the points don't matter.
Yes. At the time, her cause of death was recorded as the ferocious beast. And this phrasing of the singular the, implies this is not the first victim of the beast, but just the first one that's recorded. Or does that make sense? Because, like, why would they call it the beast? Wouldn't it be a beast?
Yeah, that is pretty interesting phrasing. Because it's like, unless they have just, like, a cause of death that's just, like, the ferocious beast. It's like, it's not necessarily a specific one. But yeah, that is still, like, it's very interesting phrasing that it's not, like, just, oh, it's an animal attack. But it's like, no, it is a specific ferocious beast.
And culturally at the time, they actually do make a distinction between beast and monster. And at this time, also, monster doesn't mean something that's necessarily an animal. The term monster means something that is contrary to the natural order of things, and is most often reserved to refer to human activities. Humans, or human-like things, are monstrous. Beasts are just doing what they do.
Yeah.
Therefore, that's the natural order. As the story goes on, though, we're going to find, like, they still refer to it as the beast, but it is often attributed the qualities of a monster. Because it seems to, it gets real crafty. And also, this attack is not a one-off. It becomes a more recurrent thing. Starting a few months later on August 8th, another 14-year-old girl is tending her flock, and she's killed in a similar fashion. Over the next few months, especially in September, between the 1st and 26th of September, there's 4 more deadly attacks. and then they start becoming more frequent. By mid-September, there are already armed for what they can be armed, groups of peasants who are wandering the countryside and doing what they call beating the bush, which is like literally beating
Yeah.
bushes and trying to drive an animal out. So they're looking for it. Pretty soon, even though it's an isolated locality, word starts to leak out of the Gevaudan and into other provinces of France. Word starts to spread that there is some horrible, and this time they start to describe it as monster that's terrorizing the peasants. Now we're going to briefly talk about how the government is broken down on this level. Administration. The best, everybody's favorite part of Star Wars, right, is when they decided to talk about like trade delegations and shit like that. But it really was the whole key and context to the later Star War. So at this time, you have your provinces and administrative areas that are called generalities, is what they call these areas. And you have a administrator, and then there's sub-delegates. And this starts with, you have the intendant, who is equal. They're on par with the governor of a province, but they're separate, but they still have like the same amount of administrative power. And that's the intendant. And in this case, the intendant of Gevaudan is a guy named Saint Priest. And that just really kept throwing me to read Saint Priest. Like, which is he? Is he a saint? Is he a priest? He's both. Oh no, that's his name. His name is Saint Priest.
He's both.
Yeah.
Por qué no los dos?
And so he's like at the top. Like, there's the court at Versailles, and then there's people, administrators and stuff, and then governors, and then it steps down, and then you have Saint Priest, who's the intendant, and then he subdelegates that job below him to a subdelegate named Etienne Lafont. And Lafont is actually somebody who grew up in Gevaudan. He is like nouveau rich. Like, he's not real nobility or peerage, as they would call it, but his father made enough money that they became wealthy enough that, like, oh no, you get a title and you get some important jobs. Basically, you grease enough palms and become rich enough, because, it's a monarchy, but let's not kid ourselves, it's also an oligarchy here. And an oligarchy here. And, so, Lafont, although he is, one of the enemy, the rich, the bourgeoisie, he is still very well liked in the region because he's still like, yeah, he's rich, but he's like one of us as far as the peasants are concerned. He speaks the local language, which I also need to point out. In Gevaudan, they do not speak the same French as the rest of France. The nobility speak a standardized form of French. The nobility does, that was only formalized like a few decades earlier. There was like this big shift where like, oh no, we speak this way, the peasants speak that way because they're ignorant. And but Lafont actually can speak both because he's from there. And they say the people there speak a patois, and a patois is a non-standardized form of a regional dialect of the language.
Which would make sense for somewhere that's so isolated and has like remained very like of itself, and especially with like a very like minimal like peasantry, that it's like, of course they have like a very distinct dialect.
And we see that here in the United States. As you move westward, dialects and accents in America tend to all kind of blend into each other, and part of that's because the actual geological barriers for people like communicating with each other kind of decrease, and also you have more people who are coming in from these other areas, and so it all just kind of homogenizes. But as you move east to the east coast of the United States, you find all kinds of crazy dialects and accents, and usually it is a geological boundary as simple as a river. There's one place, like for example, the rotive and non-rotive R in the, for example, if I were to say park the car, as we would say here, but you go to parts of New England, it's park the car. And there is an actual place where there is a river, and the river is only several yards wide. But on one side of the river, they park the car, and on the other side, they park the car. So now imagine a plateau that's raised up 4,000 feet and very inhospitable. Yeah, they're going to speak different there.
Yeah. That's always so like interesting when it's I think California is really interesting because so much emigration occurred here, so lots of people coming in, and it really makes the quote-unquote Californian accent feel very like nondescript, though if we go anywhere else everybody says we have an accent, and it's like it's almost our lack of accent is our accent.
Trying to like pin down what the California accent is also like, is there a difference between NorCal and SoCal? And I think it's more in word choice than it is in the way words are said.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
But the fact that they speak this patois will come up later in some of the way the story plays out. Okay, so we have Lafont. He is the subdelegate, and then below him, you get into your counts, and we have the Comte de Moranger, and so he is like. I was telling my brother about this, and he's like, "Oh yeah, it's a whole bunch of vampires. He's the vampire who rules over this area because he's the count." And I'm like, "Yeah, I guess that's kind of he does feed on the people, yeah." Moranger he's also kind of complicated in that like he is the nobility, he is different, but he also like has an interest in his region that he's in charge of because if it prospers, he prospers. But he's also more involved in the court. He fought or his son fought in the 7 Years' War. So he has that connection. And then, of course, separate from all this, but also still in charge, because like they have power, but the real power is also the bishop. You have the Bishop of Mend. Mend would be it's one of the larger settlements in the Gevaudan, and it is the seat of the ecclesiastical power in the area. So the Bishop of Mend kind of says what goes. And so those are the players we have, and there's more that'll come up. But that just lets you know, like, yeah, it's just like bureaucracy, very bureaucratic, and the peasants are always going to be at the bottom of the shit pile.
Mm-hmm.
And even within the peasants, there's peasants who are even further at the bottom, namely women.
Yeah.
Who are the ones who are getting attacked the most because they have the job of watching the flock. But we're going to... so as the fall of 1764 progresses and the attacks become more frequent, and the word starts to spread out, December 31st, the Bishop of Mend then gives what's called a mandement. He basically gives a sermon that is then copied, spread out to all of the local, they're called cures, which are the local parish priests. And then they, in turn, read it to their congregations. And this counts as the official stance of the church in the region. And the official stance is...
Oh, no.
Blame the women. So here is but it's actually more than that, and we're going to get into it. And you notice I'm not really talking much about the beast or the attacks, because as we're looking through the agathidoscope, we see that the actual identity of the beast isn't as important as all the players involved who are jockeying for power, position, and their own goals. So here is an excerpt from the mandement of the Bishop of Mend in December 31st, 1764. Quote, "The sex whose principal ornament has always been decency and modesty seems no longer to know these qualities. Girls make a spectacle of themselves, displaying their worldliness and glorying in what should cause them shame. They entrap the innocent and seek to attract even in our temples the admiration due only to the divinity. An adulterous and criminal flesh that serves as a demon's instrument to seduce and lead to perdition. Does it not deserve to be delivered up to the murderous teeth of the ferocious beasts that tear it to pieces?" Hey man, way to Frollo really fucking hard. Carolyn looks broken, or she's frozen. I don't know yet.
Okay.
Okay. She's struggling for words.
It is. Okay.
The subtitle would just read "exasperated sigh."
It's truly one of those just like we as a collective don't know how to handle a problem, so we're going to point the finger at someone else. And we're going to choose the people who are at the very bottom of the rung and make it their problem. Again, we can absolutely not draw any parallels to today. But it is also this very, like, just position of just not understanding of, like, hey, these women have to go out and tend to the flock of sheep because that is their livelihood and their family's livelihood. And you are blaming them for being murdered. Which,
Yeah, because
hey,
and
we're not supposed to blame the victim for getting attacked anymore, right?
Well, yeah, here's the thing. He also says that in some of these cases where it's children, the children themselves weren't to blame, but their parents were. And as we know, although I've always thought the Bible said the sins of the father weren't the sins of the child. However, in other places they say that the inequities of the father should be retributed on the children for 4 generations. So, And in this case, also, he has a very ulterior motive that is also tied to the context of France at the time. So again, we're going to adjust this little agathidoscope a bit more to get more of the picture. We all know about the beef between Protestants and Catholics, right? That's well-known established territory. But did you know that even within the Catholics, there's a whole bunch of petty bitchiness that happens? Nobody can be a catty bitch like a Catholic priest.
Can confirm.
And in this case, in France, we have a battle for dominance of France between the Jesuits, who have controlled France for a very long time, and an upstart group called the Jansenists. And the Jansenists, yeah, I know.
I was like, I've vaguely heard of the Jansenists.
And see, I should be somewhat biased here because my degree comes from a Jesuit university. And I have family. My uncle is a Jesuit priest. The Jesuits today, a lot cooler than they used to be. They were real pieces of shit in their origin because they were founded as a militaristic order to combat the influence of Judaism specifically. And that's why their entire order still uses terms like general and commanders because it's a military order that along the way tripped and stumbled into academia and then got really into academics and through learning things expanded their viewpoint to the point where like now they actually are like champions of the poor and different cultural groups and really like, you know, our latest pope, not perfect, but pretty progressive considered general popism.
Oh, yeah.
And he was a Jesuit, the first Jesuit pope, because about 100 years ago, they were excommunicated completely by the church for being too radical and too into the poor.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's not who they are at the time of 1760s France. Oh, God, no. And the Jansenists, they are basing their whole movement on the writings of this Dutch guy, Jansen.
Uh-huh.
And he basically said, like, there's no place in the church for superstition. He also doesn't like the veneration of saints, per se.
Oh,
he's like...
Yeah, okay, that's why I know him.
Yeah, he's like, no, anything that seems miraculous is not witchcraft. It comes through the will of God for various punishing reasons. So, you know, there's no supernatural. It's only the supreme naturality of God's divine will. And so that starts to kind of like schism. And in 1763... the Jansenists actually succeed in getting the Jesuit order expelled from France by order of the king.
Wow.
He's like, get the Jesuits out of here. The Bishop of Mende is a Jansenist. And so what he's doing in his, like, he's picking on the women, but he's also trying to point out moral failings in the community because they still hold to the Jesuit interpretation of Catholicism. So he's saying like, yeah, you're all harlots because you are practicing this corrupt version of the divine message. And that is now being put upon your children. Further beyond that, 60 years prior, there had been a Huguenot uprising. The Huguenots are the French Protestants. Guess where a stronghold of deep entrenched Huguenot resistance was?
Of course.
Gevaudan, because it's so rural and inaccessible that of course they could entrench themselves in like tents and hide out. It's a great hideout. So what he's doing here is he's seizing on the opportunity of the series of wild animal attacks to push his own agenda and vision on the local populace and tried to tell them, you are being punished for not doing the right form of Christianity, which is the Jansenist form. He also has, I think it's like a brother who is part of the court in Versailles. So he has like a lot of, there's a lot of back and forth between the people at the top of the monarchy to him and influence. So that's what's going on there. There's this context that would not, I mean, you'd read it like, okay, yes, he's just a shitty misogynist. And that is true. But he's also trying to hide in there because there's also like people, the peasantry at this time are starting to say, this could be witchcraft. It could be a werewolf, a loup-garou. That comes up a lot. The idea of a werewolf being responsible, because this has been going on for months and they can't catch the beast. They've tried. It seems to know where their traps are. It seems to time its attacks for right after they stop hunting for it. It like lays low. This seems like some kind of evil, malicious intelligence at play. At which point the Jansenist bishop is like, no, none of that superstitious bullshit. You are being punished by God, and it's because you believe in this superstitious bullshit. Also, the women are too fucking sexy. That has to stop.
Yeah, there are many texts written by monks, and it's usually explicitly monks who are like, women are this, and this, and they are corrupt, and they go against God. And it's like, you're cloistered away. Without any contact to women. This is why you're thinking this. Also, there's a series of like paintings of the Virgin Mary that got, this is one of my favorite like historical things, is a series of paintings of the Virgin Mary where she's depicted as being like very, very beautiful and sexy. And that is literally because the people who paid to have those paintings done were weird and horny about the Virgin Mary. But like, it's true. It's just like this every moral failing that you perceive to have as a man, you push upon someone else. It's not my fault that I feel this way, and this is how I view the women around me. Again, we're looking back at Frollo, who literally has a whole number in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which is blaming our main female character for being too sexy, and it's her fault.
Yeah.
That she is damning him to hell because she is making him feel this way.
My dude, you need to touch grass and touch ass. Go out, man. Go.
No, just go walk into the river and never return.
Yeah, well, that too for him specifically. But
yeah.
I mean, like, as a whole, the clergy needs to,
Cold shower. Everybody needs a cold shower.
Okay, so we have the religious aspect now. Now we're going to look at journalistic integrity and the journalism of the time, because this is another facet of the story. Here we're going to have a brief quote from Francois Morenas. I wonder if it's eventually that name became Moranis, and it's the same family name as like Rick Moranis, because he's Canadian and there's the French influence in Canada.
Oh.
It might be Moranis.
Potentially.
Anyway, I digress. Francois Moranis, real piece of shit, this guy. They all are. So here's his quote, because he's an editor of a newspaper called the Courrier d'Avignon. And at this time, newspapers are also incredibly restricted by the monarchy, and it's just barely state media. Like, they are given very limited scope of what they can and can't talk about. For example, no covering political issues. You can't talk politics, at least not overtly. Up until this point, though, readership has mostly been made up of people wanting to hear about the 7 Years' War. They don't cover local news stories. These are things that they call fait divers, which are like things from the rural countryside, daily life of the hoi polloi peasants. That's just not newsworthy. Instead, what they cover are the horrors of war. And then when that ends, then they start looking at like, well, let's look at these amusing things from around the country and report on them, because it's let's laugh at the idiots, basically. So here's his quote. Peace, which is so productive of lasting benefits, is hardly productive of notable occurrences. The years that unfurl in the midst of peace are like those peaceful rivers that flow over undisturbed terrain and produce only uniform effects. It lacks the extraordinary happenings that strike the mind and the senses. It turns up only monotonous objects and nothing in common with the picturesque. Now, we've talked about the picturesque on the show before, that the picturesque was this movement that kind of starts happening in the late 1700s of big scope pictures. You know, we want to see like the horrifying reality of nature is the picturesque. It's like terrifying and terrible, but like in the same way of like, no, it's really awe-inspiring. He's like, the daily shit, it doesn't strike that chord. We need blood. We need guts. War is good for selling papers. Outrage is good for selling papers. Yeah. Nothing's changed since then, right?
It has, yeah, it has not gotten any different in the last 260 something years, if I'm doing my math right.
Like 260.
Yeah.
As of like last year, this year. Oh yeah, I guess this is like the 260th
if
anniversary
this is
of when
like
this is happening.
1765-ish, yeah.
Yeah. So the war ends in a disaster for France. They don't have the regular stories that they could be bringing from the vast battlefront of the war, which actually I argue that the 7 Years' War is actually like the first, I'd call it the First World War, really, because it has battlefields that are fought across empires all over the globe, which would make the Napoleonic Wars the Second World War, which means that what we call the First World War is merely the first post-industrial war.
Yeah.
Is how I would look at it. So the 7 Years' War, though, is like this global conflict where there are battles happening on European soil, including in France. You have the fights happening in the New World. I think in American history books, we just call it the French-Indian War. But yeah, the 7 Years' War. So we don't have these news stories coming in. France loses. Everybody's bummed out. He's like, I need something to catch the attention and drive papers. Because also, in 1759, they lift restrictions on foreign papers being able to be distributed in France. Before this, you only had a handful of French papers, and everybody really wants this paper that's like the Gazette of Amsterdam is the one that everyone really wants, and that now becomes available in France. And so the French papers have to compete even more.
Capitalism ruins everything once again.
For example, early in the year 1763, there is a huge earthquake in Lisbon, Portugal. And it like levels the city. He milks this news story for over a year. Where like not a month goes by where he doesn't publish several news stories about new human tragedy or stories of heroism that came from the Lisbon earthquake. So he's really milking this cash cow until the Beast of Gevaudan. Once these attacks start to come out and they hit his radar, because now he's actually looking for these local news stories, it comes across his desk and he's like, this is the one. For example, in the month of December 1764, leading up to the bishop's Mondmont, he publishes 14 stories in a month about the attacks of Gevaudan.
Wow.
That's a lot of coverage.
Yeah.
He also happens upon, again, capitalism is the cause and solution to all of our problems, but mostly the cause. So at this time, the postal service, you have to also remember this is like pre-telegram. When people are like selling newspapers, they have to travel through the mail to get to rural areas. It travels by post. Like if you're outside of Paris, the news comes slow and it comes by mail. The king enacts a new postage tax, which is pretty high. So on top of paying a subscription for your magazine, you have to pay the postage tax. Marinus goes to the guy who has been like subdelegated at the court to like handle the postal service. And he goes, hey, what if I pay you a lump sum at the beginning of the year, and then it doesn't matter how many subscribers I have, that lump sum, you deliver my paper without postage due. There's no postage on it because I paid you. And for the guy, he's like, well, this could work out in my benefit because say you have even fewer subscriptions than you thought, I'm still getting a bare minimum of so many thousands of livres at the time. And so it's a good deal. What this means is that everybody all over France can now get the paper for the subscription cost. They don't have to pay the tax. So this paper spreads very far and wide and becomes like the biggest seller. And every issue is full of stories about these horrific attacks happening in Gevaudan.
Which just like, so it would take, an event occurs in Gevaudan. The news of that event would take some amount of time to make its way to Paris.
Yes.
Where this guy would hear about it and then begin writing stories about it. So by the time something actually happens in Gevaudan,
yeah,
it's like that paper is now just getting there with the news that occurred like a month ago. Just so the 14 stories in 1 month just basically means that he made up some amount of it.
Yeah.
For sure.
And that it's actually like staggering the coverage. What it means is like it's giving this amplifying effect. So that like as things are happening, people are just reading things about things that already happened. So even in the region where the story is getting there, it's like amplifying it and just making it like even bigger. It's,
yeah.
And then on top of that, there's no copyright laws at this time. And so other newspapers just wholesale steal things and republish.
Mm-hmm.
So not only do you have his paper being widespread and telling the story, other people are just stealing it outright and copy paste, and they're publishing it to sell their own papers. And he has this idea or this like personal belief that he is paying for the stories, but because he bought the story, it's now his, and he can change it however he sees fit. It becomes his property. So details get exaggerated and made up, including things where, like, if you're a discerning reader and he gives you an account of somebody's fight with the beast that ends in their death, you have to wonder, how does anyone know this? If no one was there to see it, how do they know that the sparkling fire in the beast's eyes froze the person in the spot as it jumped on them? That's weird. He also really pushes this detail that kind of builds up, is that, like, the beast has a penchant for going for the throat and decapitating people. In one case, the head of a woman is found very far away. The flesh has been completely removed and has been cracked open like a walnut. He's very purple journalism, like the purple prose. The words are, it's very descriptive because he's got to sell that blood and gut angle. And it's like it's cracked open like a nut, and the flesh has been removed. And like what kind of monster, what kind of beast would do such a thing? People start thinking like the werewolf angle, or the idea that there might be human involvement because it is so monstrous. Early on, the idea starts getting pushed out by some people who have seen it or claim to have seen it, that this is actually a hyena. And we'll get more into that because we're going to get into like possible what it is. But in a lot of the reports, it is referred to as the hyena in the Gevaudan.
So interesting.
There's also people who think it might be a lion. We're going to get into that. And of course, just wolves. And we're going to get into that too.
Mm-hmm.
But when criticized about exaggerating, for example, he exaggerates the numbers of people being killed. At the highest estimates, it's like 200 to 300 people have been killed by the beast.
Yeah.
According to Lafont, who is the subdelegate who is in the area, he's like, no, like at most like 60, which is still a lot of people for a region that has low population density.
Yeah.
60 people is still pretty excessive, but it's not 200 to 300 people.
Yeah, that's a lot of people in terms of like that would still be quote unquote record breaking, like if we were seeing like large scale like animal attacks like that. But it falls well within the range of like pretty normal encounters in the wilderness.
Yeah. So when criticized though, and I'm paraphrasing here, he said, "Some say we're exaggerating, but in truth, we haven't even been telling you half of all the terrible things the beast has done. Believe me, it's way worse than we're telling you. We're trying to protect your sensibilities and protect you from the true horror of what's going on." Now, we hear that kind of rhetoric as well today, right? Made up stories about some kind of foreign invader that comes into an area and is preying on the local people.
Fentanyl. What?
Which brings us to our next facet as we adjust the agathidoscope. The crown really needs to save face.
Yeah.
Uh, because they just lost the aforementioned war in all that territory. The book I read really brings home this idea of this sense of injured masculinity that all the noblemen and the soldiers who've come back from, and even the public on some level, like feels like the masculinity of the empire has been damaged, and now they need to toxically overcompensate for that to prove that they're real men.
My is about to fall out of my head with how much I'm rolling them.
Oh yeah. So the king is like, okay, something's going on here. We need to make a very conspicuous show of trying to solve this issue to placate the peasantry and keep them happy. So, on one hand, the regime in Versailles is okay with these news stories because it builds up this monster so that when they finally destroy the monster, it makes them look more heroic.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to backfire spectacularly in their faces in about 20 years or so. Because when you spend a whole lot of time telling a impoverished, subjugated people that there is a monster amongst you that is preying on you and your weakness. In fact, it removes your very head to sustain itself. This thing needs to be destroyed. And the peasants start to like, so, yeah, you know what? You're right. There is this giant bloated monster that is feeding on us and tearing off our heads. It only exists off of our misery. And they start side-eyeing the nobility, and the nobles are like, whoa, no, 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 no. Ho, whoa, whoa, no, no. It's a monster. It's this monster. It's not us.
We weren't talking about us. No. That is definitely not what we were talking about. We were talking about a literal beast.
Yes, there's a monster. It's not us, but it's amongst you. And also, it's always singular. They are really like early on. They set on this idea that it has to be one monster.
That is also super interesting. That they are convinced that it is a singular entity.
And that will come up as we get into like possible identities, because there is a cultural reason. It's one of the cases where the Enlightenment isn't so enlightened, or at least it only illuminates further ignorance. But I'm getting ahead of myself. At this time, Lafont, who, if we remember, is actually from the area. So he is of the people, but he's like somewhat rich. He's a minor nobility. He comes up with this idea. He's like, the best way to solve this problem is we need to teach the locals how to solve it themselves. Because, the good Lord helps he who helps himself. Although that's not in the Bible. That's actually Ben Franklin. He said it around a mouthful of French whores.
And while naked in front of a window.
Yeah. But Lafont says, hey, maybe we should arm the locals and teach them how to use guns. That did not go over well, as you would expect from the higher-ups.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, no. You know what we're going to do? Instead, we are going to send soldiers into the area. In fact, we have this guy stationed nearby. He's the head of a dragoon regiment, dragoon being horseback mounted cavalry. This guy named Duhamel. And he's got a bone to pick because he was really, really emasculated during the war. Mainly because his buddy who he served under dishonored himself multiple times in certain battles to the point where he was dismissed in dishonor. And because Duhamel was like the guy following his orders, by extension, he was dishonored. So he's really got something to prove. So we're going to let him kind of just like run roughshod over the area and set the idea of how this is going to be done. And it's from Duhamel that we got that description of the beast that we started off with. He interviews a peasant woman who survives, gets that description, goes to an engraver and has the engraver make up a picture of it, and then disseminates that. Well, he sends it to Versailles, but in such a way that it would like, oops, it's exposed for the newspaper to get a conveniently made copy and reprint. And so what he's doing is he is basically trying to inflate the myth himself so that when he succeeds, he can reclaim his honor as well. And he starts like making up excuses for why he hasn't succeeded as well. So he is given like control in February, and until June, he's like the guy that's in charge. He eventually gets dismissed because he fails spectacularly because he can't produce the beast.
We ain't found shit.
But he has many stories of, I had it in my crosshairs, I tried to shoot, something went wrong, like my other soldiers rode up and startled it away, or I did shoot it. There's lots of stories of people who say they shot it and then it escaped, and so now it seems impervious to bullets.
Yeah, there develops that like mythos around the Beast of Gevaudan that it is somehow impervious to harm, that it can be shot multiple times and it just like shrugs it off and runs away, kind of thing.
He leads a series of mass hunts throughout those few months where he actually like everybody. He pulls peasants off the farm work. It's like, no, you're showing up this day. And they're like, okay, well, also like right now there's a freak snowstorm. There's like a blizzard. It's like the middle of April. And he's like, I don't care. We're getting out there and we're going to go trudge around and try to find the beast. So that starts to really piss off the local people. And also he doesn't speak the language. He speaks down to them and expects them to just follow his orders. And the entire time he keeps, so a lot of this is like through letters that are being written to higher ups and correspondences that we have as record. And he is always like, especially when he like communicates with the Count de Moranger, he's like, hey, when you talk to your like bosses, can you let them know that I'm like really trying really hard? Like, you know, it rained that day, right? Like, I'm doing my best.
I'm doing my bestest job. I'm trying so hard. I'm working everyone to the bone.
Yeah.
Gotta CYA.
And then in January, late January, there is a really exciting event that transpires that gets picked up by the papers and naturally becomes like the highlight of the story for this period, which is a group of children out watching their flock are attacked by the beast. It grabs one of their little friends and starts dragging them away, at which point a 10-year-old boy, whose name is Portefeuille, which translates to Carter. So he is like, in Carter being the lowliest profession somebody could have in France at this time. So that's almost like it's written. It's like perfect. The person with the lowliest name, who is from the muck of the earth, stands up and tells his friends, no, we need to save our friend. We need to pursue the beast, or else in doing so perish. And he rouses them up with like an inspirational speech.
It's time for the Goonies.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Goonies never say die. And they grab their little shepherd's crocks and their sticks, and they chase the beast until it gets mired in a bog, and they surround it and just beat the ever-loving shit out of it with sticks until it drops the other child and flees away. He might have even stabbed it with a bayonet in the butt. Because the story gets retold and inflated all these times. And so this reaches the court, and the court, because the king's like, okay, this is perfect. This is like, we couldn't concoct a better piece of propaganda if we tried. A guy with this name that means he's nothing exhibits extreme nobility despite his low class. We can use this for political gain. And so the king authorizes basically buying the child from their parents, which isn't that much of a loss for them because they have 6 other kids. They pay their parents.
Can spare one.
Yeah, they give the parents 300 livres. A livre at this time is 1 livre equals 1 pound of silver. So they give him 300 livres as a sign of good faith for good job. You've raised a noble spirited peasant. Hooray! And then they take the kid and they enlist him in a military academy where he's going to have the best education available to him. Keep in mind, he doesn't speak standardized French. He cannot read. And yet, despite all this, apparently, he has like a very successful career. It turns out to be insanely adept at calculating artillery trajectories, probably from being a kid and throwing rocks.
Oh, yeah.
For fun. And and he seems by all means to like, I mean, he probably would have been killed during the revolution, but he unfortunately meets some kind of accident and dies in 1785. But up until that point, he actually, local boy does good.
Also,
but that becomes like...
Also hilarious that like Cartier as a last name was such a like kind of signified such a low like standing in terms of peasantry because hey, what's the name of one of the largest jewelry retailers right now? Cartier.
Ah. Yeah, so then that happens in January. And then in February, another story arises of, again, local woman. She has 7 children. She's trying to like literally juggle a newborn and garden in like winter, which is kind of interesting. When the beast jumps over the garden wall, snatches her 6-year-old child by the head. She grabs the feet, and now she's in a tug of war with a child and the beast while holding a nursing newborn. The beast breaks free and jumps over the wall. That's another thing that the beast supposedly can do is it can leap incredible heights. It has a leaping prowess where it just can cover hedges and walls, no problem. But somehow this mother is able to also climb the wall and gives chase to a point where she actually jumps on its back and rides the beast for a while pummeling it. I don't know if she's still holding the baby or not. And then as she's fighting the beast, it says like for a quarter of an hour, she has like a standoff and tug of war with this child. Someone hears the commotion. A man, of course. He shows up with a bayonet and starts stabbing at the beast, at which point it finally gives up and leaves. Sadly, the 6-year-old, had it not had its neck broken through a tug of war, dies. However, this woman becomes like a stand-in as like the mother of France. They're like, oh, it exemplifies the supreme nobility inherent in motherhood, even though women are lesser. But still, they write songs about her in Paris, in the salons. They are reciting ballads about this woman. They give her a bunch of money to make up for the lost kid. And so that's another thing that the crown is like, oh yes, we need to like really build this up because it's good publicity for us. And in fact, a few years earlier, there had been a very popular best-selling novel amongst the noble classes, a book called Julie, about a woman who, at the end of the book, spoilers for a book no one's going to read, her child is drowning, she throws herself into the river and pushes the child to shore, and she herself drowns, but her last image is seeing that her child is safe, and this should be a lesson to all women to be good mothers. And so here is this other woman who fights a beast, and it's like, oh, it reminds us of the book Julie. This is great. And so, she becomes the cause celebrity. At this time, the idea of a celebrity wasn't even a thing. In fact, the book kind of says that the beast becomes one of the first modern celebrities in the sense that it is something that is reported on and people follow with rapt attention that isn't political. It's like an individual and the drama around it.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely that feels accurate for just like the basic definition of celebrity.
Yeah, I just realized this could be a very long episode. We're over an hour.
I know where
There's a lot to cover.
There's so much to cover, and especially with the fact that it's like you have to set up all of this like internalized strife within France that is really conflating what at its very core is peasants are being attacked and killed by something.
And then how can that be beneficial to the nobles?
And how can that make us feel better about our own internalized self in regards to our masculinity as French men?
Yes. There's a bunch of rewards that are offered. The Bishop of Mende puts up 1,000 livre reward. The Comte de Moranger puts up like a 6,000 livre reward, and then the crown puts up another 3,000. So all told, if somebody kills the beast, they stand to get 10,000 livres given to them. Now, I tried to figure out what that would be adjusted for inflation, and it's really hard because I couldn't find, like, for example, okay, it's worth a pound of silver, but how much was a pound of silver worth, in 1764 France? I don't know. What would that correspond to, like, there weren't American dollars to base that off of, so what would that be? So what I did to kind of, and I know this is not accurate, but just to kind of give us like a rough, like we could work with this number, maybe. A pound of silver today, I broke it down. All I have here in my notes is that it would be worth about $4.6 million today. So
yeah, that's sizable.
If we use today's current value of silver and then like extrapolate it out, which is not exactly, but imagine today, so it's like, hey, Go kill that animal and I will give you $4.6 million. And this isn't just for people in the local region. They decide, we're going to let anybody from France come in to Gevaudan and try to reap the reward. So what you end up with is a bunch of people wanting money and mercenary type people who just invade the province and start tromping through people's gardens and fields and doing whatever they want, basically brigands who come in and start terrorizing the region as well. And Duhamel writes to the crown, is like, hey, you got to get these people out of here. They're keeping me from doing my job. And they're like, well, we kind of can't at this point. We're kind of stuck because we put out the reward. Everybody's reading about the stories. If we then like cancel the reward, it's going to make us look really bad. So just kind of tough and deal with it.
Which is hilarious because it's like you have somebody that they explicitly sent out to do the job. Mm-hmm. And then it's like all of this
outsourced below that.
Yeah. All of these rewards are happening. And so now it's like muddying the waters. And it's like, okay, I physically cannot do my job because there's all these other people around. So it's either you want me to do it and it will actually get you what you want as the crown of me successfully killing the beast. But there's also all of these rewards that are around that's really muddying the waters. And it's like, well, why am I even doing my job if like, I guess that guy was he going to get a reward if he actually killed it? Or was he just going to get his like usual military stipend?
I think he would get the reward. And remember, he wants to reclaim his hurt masculinity.
Oh, yes.
His pee-pee feels small and now he feels bad about it. And so he wants to like flex nuts all over the town, I guess. I don't know. Sorry to be vulgar, but that is what's going on. It's like extremely toxic masculinity.
So toxic.
To the point of toxic masculinity. This will be one of the last things before we take a break here. There's a letter that's written to the Courrier d'Avignon from a woman. And it's an anonymous letter. And she says that it's long past time to, quote, furnish these women of the Gevaudan with firearms, powder, and lead. One of them, before the end of the month, will have brought down her aggressor, made her retribution, and avenged my sex. This person seems to imply, I don't think it really is a wild animal at all. I think it's a dude. There might be men out there who are taking advantage of women. Give the women guns, and they'll kill your beast for you.
Yeah, at the very heart of it, hey, how could this problem be more easily solved? You either help the peasantry by making sure that they don't have to be risking their lives all the time. So, provide them extra nutrients and money to stay home.
Yeah.
Or you give them an opportunity to actually protect themselves because, again, they're still the target.
And these are some things that actually did kind of factor in. For example, Lafont, because he's from there, remember I said he wanted to arm the peasantry and he was told no. Then he said, well, how about we pay them to stay home?
Yeah.
Think about that. It's like, hey, why don't we give them some kind of like 20 levers so that they can stay home for a bit, and be out of our way while we hunt the beast. And at the very least, it'll keep them from starving and it will, we can solve the problem. And that's met with like, no, we can't do that. The peasants have got a peasant, you can't.
No, that's almost an intelligent idea. Why would we ever do that?
What, are you suggesting some kind of stimulus payment? That's ridiculous.
No, never.
At this point, we're pretty far in. And we haven't even discussed what the beast is. So we're actually going to start addressing what the beast might actually have been, some theories, etc. And then we'll see perhaps the exciting but most definitely disappointing conclusion of this whole story. But first, dig for bones!
Bones! We gotta go find some beast bones. Gotta go find some heads, because apparently it used to take heads.
Howdy, I'm Luke from the Howdy Beans podcast, a variety podcast where I look into topics each week into the world of pop culture, like book reviews, where I delve deep into the expanded universe of Doctor Who, or a movie review on the 1998 cult classic The Mummy, or if you're very lucky, I might take a peek under the hood of video games both new and old. So what are you waiting for? Check out the Howdy Beans podcast now on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else that you may find your podcast, and I'll see you very soon.
Elsewhere in the world in the year 1765, Frederick the Great, King of Prussia, issues a decree abolishing the historic punishments against unmarried women in Germany for, quote, sex crimes, particularly the Hurenstrafen, or whore-shaming practice of public humiliation. Great Britain passes both the Quartering Act and the Stamp Act on their American colonies. This will lead closer to eventual revolution. Catherine the Great establishes the first secondary education school for non-noble females in Russia. William Stukeley, English archaeologist and early investigator of Stonehenge, dies. That's what's going on in the world in 1765. And we're back.
We found bones?
Yes. We
Ah.
found some bones.
I also found, like, a head.
Was it cracked open like a nut and all the flesh removed?
No, it was missing eyes and a tongue, though.
As I was reading the thing about, they said like the heads being removed and then finding the heads defleshed, all I could think of was like, well, there's your next Predator movie right there, goddammit. It's actually the Predator, but the Predator wouldn't attack unarmed peasants. Not the Predator style.
No, that's not
honor.
That's not sporting enough.
Okay, so now we're going to get into, before we get to like the whole conclusion of the story, and I know we've been out like in the weeds for a bit, but the story's not straightforward. It really isn't.
We haven't been in the weeds. We've been walking the halls of Versailles and like following around all those stinky like makeup wigged people.
Yeah, because it really is. It's the context. You know, you have to understand what is going on for this story to really make sense. But at the heart of it, yes, there are people being attacked and killed by something. And so now I think we're going to take a break from the story. It's linear fashion, and we are going to explore some ideas about what it could be. And I think that's where we start to fall into your wheelhouse.
From like the research I've done, just because primarily my emphasis is California and North American specific wildlife, I did actually have to do some research on like what we were talking about. And though specifically talking about Eurasian wolves, their behavior isn't that different from like North American gray wolves. There's still some variation in like how they respond to things. So yeah, do you want me to just like jump into talking about wolves, or do we want to start like listing off our potential suspects?
Well, let's go through some of our potential suspects, because there's like there's 5 main ones, and one of them ties into why they thought it was only one animal.
Okay.
So yeah, potential suspects who were thought to be the culprit at the time and even into modern times by historians. First, let's get it out of the way. They described it as a hyena initially.
Hyena like could have been possible just like because menageries. Yeah, menageries are a thing, and if we're talking about specifically the spotted hyena, which is the largest hyena species, they're like decently sized animals. They're up to 37.4 to 65.3 inches in length, so that's a decent sized like body. At the shoulder, they can be up to 36 inches, so that's like almost 3 feet from the ground all the way up to their like shoulder. And they also weigh between 90. So hyenas are an interesting species because the females are actually bigger than males. So males can be about 90 pounds to 150 pounds, whereas females can be 98 to 153 pounds. So like a decent sized animal that could do this.
Yeah.
And they do hunt, but they will scavenge. And they tend to prefer prey that is like right around the same body size, so about 120, but they can take down up to things that are up to about 400 pounds. But that is hunting as a collective and as a group,
Yeah.
which is pretty common for hyenas. Fun fact, hyenas are not canines. They fall within the same family as felids and felines, but they're like a really kind of just like separate entity from normal feliforms.
Yeah, in the same way that this will probably come up in your corner, but yeah, hyena is to cat what direwolf is to wolf.
Kind of, yeah. And so for hunting behavior, hyenas will, if it's a small enough prey, they'll catch it and then give it a really good shake, and that usually will snap its neck. And then if it's something larger, they actually will often consume. So once they get the prey down on the ground, they will start consuming it as it is still alive.
Like a bear.
So they will not actually kill it. So that's hyenas. And if you think of a spotted hyena, it is like obviously very like it has spots, hence the name. And it tends to have a lighter underbelly, and it does have a crest that runs along its back, and with a slightly like bushy tail. So it does fit within descriptions. However, as we talked about, how accurate are some of these descriptions, and how have they not been like sprinkled?
Yeah. The hyena theory at the time, like right away, they said, it probably escaped from a menagerie, because menageries were a popular thing that nobles had. Like, look at the conspicuous pets. Look at my crazy animal from some foreign place. Look how rich I am. I was able to bring it here. There's also traveling menageries, because if you're not rich enough to afford one, you can at least go and see one as it travels the countryside. So that would be like the idea of where it could have come from.
And also for thinking of something that is from a menagerie, it has the association of people mean food.
Yeah, because it's being hand fed.
So me interacting with a person means I'm going to be fed. And often, hey, don't feed the wildlife. This is why we, like, wildlife professionals tell you constantly, don't feed wildlife, because you're making that human gives me food assumption to an animal. And if you don't feed that animal, it can then lead to some amount of like violence. And so that's usually like a strong indicator of why are we seeing lots of human wildlife conflicts in an area? Oh, somebody's been actively feeding animals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just beyond the danger to people being attacked, it poses a danger to the animal as well, because once it starts exhibiting this behavior, at least in our modern times, animal control's like, well, now we have no choice but to exterminate this animal.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you are doing a great disservice to the animal by feeding it in this fashion.
Yes, that's very true. A lot of I've done my share of coyote necropsies, and a lot of those tend to be euthanasias from animal control. Like sometimes it's a coyote that gets hit by a car and is still alive, so they euthanize it just for humane reasons. But more often than not, it is because that coyote has started to cause a problem for people. Yeah. So, hey, don't feed wildlife.
So then hyena, but then also early on, within the first few weeks, the Comte de Méranger, he suggests that it also could be some kind of large cat. Now, there is the European lynx, which, we talked about that in our Alien Big Cats episode, and it's a pretty good sized cat that could probably take down a toddler.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But not like a 14-year-old woman. But he says, no, it is something in the panther group. There were witnesses who saw it stalking somebody, and it appeared to be moving very low to the ground in the way a cat would. There's a few contradictory descriptions where they still talk about the black stripe and the red hair with a lighter underbelly, but the tail is described as being like that of a leopard's with a tuft at the end. Now, what is a large cat-like animal with a long tail that has a tuft at the end and also a big bushy mane of hair?
Yeah, so then it's like lions. Again, we're like leaning into that escaped animal from a menagerie. So that, again, animal associating people with food, and a lot of suspected, especially because it's a scruffy mane. It's not necessarily like a full mane like an adult African lion would have, or like an adult male lion would have. And so it's like a juvenile male lion. And so
Which almost makes it more dangerous because it doesn't know what it's not supposed to do.
it's to an extent, but it's also like animal in a foreign land who may not necessarily have like any sort of hunting behavior taught to it. So it is just going off of instinct and also its association with people. And that stalking behavior. So the difference between wolves and big cats primarily is that cats as predators are stalking predators. They wait until their prey is close enough that they can deliver one big powerful attack, versus a wolf where they try and get the item they want away from its group, chase it down, start disabling it until they either run that animal to exhaustion or it bleeds out.
Yeah.
So, and that description of like the rockiness and like lots of places that they could hide out, it happens a lot in California with mountain lions, is that if you are walking a trail with lots of overhangs on it, you should be looking up around those overhangs because that's where a mountain lion would sit and wait for the deer to come by, so then it can pounce down on that like lone deer in the back and like capture its prey in that way. So, I mean, a lion is possible. Lions are big. They're real big.
Yeah. But here's the thing is that this is also operating on the idea that it is one to two things responsible, because some of the early reports say, oh, the animal is seen alone, but sometimes it has another animal with it. But weirdly, that other animal isn't described like the beast. Sometimes it's like, no, it had a deer pal that was hanging out with it, or it had, some other animal that was with it. And this is actually leaning more into the supernatural aspect, because there was this belief at the time that, like, for example, if it was like a werewolf, that it would have like some other like familiar type animal, and I mean familiar in like the witchcraft kind of way. So that is kind of like, because one guy said, I saw it and it had a deer with it, like a stag, but it didn't look like any stag I had seen. It had something devilish about it. And it's like, okay, now you're just making shit up. But they're operating also on this idea that it is one thing, because it's easier to accept that, like, oh, a single lion or a single hyena escaped and is responsible. But there's also this other idea that starts to form that's really popular at this point during the Enlightenment in the scientific community. So Linnaeus has just like started doing his work on like animal nomenclature, and he has his critics. And there's this one French guy named Buffon, and Buffon is like considered like a father of biology. He is like, as far as France at that time, he's in his like 80s, I think, but he is like the guy to go to who is considered the utmost authority on biology and animal behavior and things that animals can and can't do and just stuff about him. He's the animal guy. And this popular idea is it's the hot thing at the time, is hybridism. They're really into this idea of hybrids. And the idea that Buffon comes up with, which is just seems ridiculous on its face, is that just about any animal can hybridize with any other animal. So he talks about being told, or an example of someone in France who hybridized chickens with rabbits to make chickens that are covered in rabbit's fur. Whether or not this ties to the Easter Bunny, I don't know, but it's kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah.
He also says something about somebody who hybridized a fox with a dog, which is something that we know today is impossible, but you could hybridize a dog and a wolf.
Yeah.
That happens.
Well, and you could hybridize a dog and a coyote.
Yeah, but I think foxes are too far outside, right? I don't think you can. That's why they can't make like they've tried domesticating foxes and it doesn't really work.
I mean, they've tried to domesticate. No, they've just tried to straight up domesticate foxes.
But not hybridizing.
No, I don't think they can. Okay,
Well, there's two different genuses, because you have Canis, but then foxes are Vulpes, right? Or Vulpix, like the Pokemon?
Vulpus. Vulpus is red fox. Okay. Sorry,
a female fox is called a vixen.
Sorry, I have to Google this because Oh, okay. Yeah. So foxes and dogs cannot hybridize. They have completely different sets of chromosome numbers.
Yeah.
So
okay.
dogs have 78, chromosomes, so 39 pairs, while foxes, specifically red foxes, have 64. So yeah, so that's just a mishmash in terms of like chromosome numbers. Hybridization is always just like we like the idea of it because we can get really interesting looking animals in terms of an art perspective and also while like explaining things, but it generally hybridization isn't something that occurs commonly in the wild, like naturally,
without human intervention.
That is so how we define species. So there's kind of three main waves. There's geographical, there's morphological, and then there's genetic. So genetic is the difference in the number of like chromosomes between foxes and dogs. Like they have completely different numbers of chromosomes. Morphological is like parts don't match. So that's not necessarily like explicitly like they can't have sex, but it's also like the litter size
would kill this animal.
Yeah, like the litter size that is typical for a dog, if that were to be like if a fox were to be pregnant with that litter size, it would harm her like completely. And then geographical is that like they are, well, geographical and behavioral kind of go hand in hand. I forgot about behavioral. So it's like they have no way of
never the twain shall meet.
Yeah, they have no way in coming in contact with each other. And then also in terms of behaviors, animals tend to have different courting behaviors. So how as a like, and that's like same thing for like humans too.
One animal's pickup line is another's invitation to fight.
Exactly. And so like that can also like have an effect. So that also is like what typically prevents hybridization from occurring naturally. It's like people love ligers, and it's like ligers are kind of horribly inbred. There's like a lot of problems with them. They tend to not live as long. And like mules are very popular because it's like they are very sturdy animals. They're great work animals. But you have to make mules. Mules don't make themselves.
And mules are part of the puzzle here for why they think it's one animal. So even though they erroneously think anything can hybridize with anything, their limited experience with actual hybrids like mules has taught them that hybrids are usually sterile. It's a one-off. So in the case of the beast, they say it's like, okay, it could at most only be like 2 or 3 members of a hybridized litter, but they're not creating more. So it has to be one. But then this flies in the face of the frequency and the geographical spread of attacks, because they happen in places that like there's no way an animal could cross, say, like 20 leagues in 2 hours. That's insane. A league is how much you could travel in a day, like on horse at best, you know? So like this thing can't cross these vast distances that fast. So that adds to the supernatural aspect. So you have these guys who are in the enlightened philosophers, or even the nobles who are reading these works, who are like deferring to Buffon as the expert in this, and like, okay, it could be a hybrid, but it can't be more than one. And therefore, this one creature has seemingly impossible abilities that we just have to accept because hybrids can do crazy shit, I guess. So they might be like, maybe a hyena escaped from a menagerie and bred with a wolf and then made this hybrid beast. No. We know now that can't be, but that explains some of the operational ideas behind what's happening and some of the outlandish varying descriptions of it. But then the people who are the proponents of the more than one animal theory, even at the time, say, well, that's why your beast looks so weird, is everybody's seeing a different animal in different areas and reporting what they're seeing, and then you are combining them after the fact into one animal because it has to be one animal.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy of crap.
Kind of, yeah. And it's just like, it is also trying to establish, I mean, we're going back to like kind of what the monarchy wanted, is like they wanted this one entity that they could defeat.
Yes.
And you can't defeat something that easily if it's more than one animal, because then it's like, okay, well, we may have like figured out how to get it here, but are we going to be able to get it over there too?
Yeah.
And it also just like looks really bad because it's like, oh, so you guys like didn't plan this at all. Like you did not plan your effort in any sort of reasonable way, where it was just like you focused so solely in one area that you were completely missing this other area.
And so while they're like beating the bushes in one area,
They're digging in the wrong place.
because there's something else happening over here. And so I'm going to give like one honorable mention to something else that it might be before we get to the most likely culprit, which we'll then explore a bit, and then we'll get back to the actual narrative of the story. And the honorable mention is that there might be a serial killer at play for some of these cases. Factor in the idea that they have now offered this massive reward that has invited people into the region who are not from there. It provides an opportunity for a stranger to take advantage of the situation. Somebody who displays this monstrous intelligence that they've already brought up. We're like, hey, how come it knows to avoid our traps? How come it like is quiet when we're hunting, and then as soon as we leave an area, it immediately strikes there? Why is it cutting off the heads and taking the heads seemingly like a trophy? Because there might be, one or two sick motherfuckers who are out there taking advantage of the situation, which is something that happens in our modern world and real life, of people who have these very evil intentions that seize on opportunities of chaos to get their sick jollies out. So that could be a very minor, am I saying like that definitely happened? No. Can I say that it didn't happen? Also no. So it's an honorable mention that some of these cases might be somebody taking advantage.
Well, and also like if you are trying, again, we're not saying that this actually did occur since there is no actual evidence of it, but like a beast is a great way to cover your tracks. So like you want someone dead, or if somebody dies under circumstances that you could be blamed for, make it look like the beast did it. You can't be blamed.
Yeah.
You can say the beast did it. But also I think, and we like mentioned the mercenaries coming in, as well as like the hype surrounding the beast. Potentially people wanted to like make the beast a little bit scarier and also contribute to the hype. And again, it was primarily women and children, and women and children tend to be the target of a lot of violence, like both historically and today.
Yeah, you could see somebody like, hey, let's drive this reward price even higher.
Yeah.
So inflate it that way. So that, maybe. That's, it could be. The one that I'm not going to entertain is a werewolf. I'm definitely not going to entertain that idea, because that's just silly, even though it was just recently brought to my attention on the Discord, thanks, Rain Zacket, that past enemy of the show, John Keel of Mothman Prophecy fame, has seemingly made up a detail that silver bullets were used in this situation, and that it was a werewolf or some otherworldly beast. I didn't know that until like last night. So yeah. And in fact, there's actually a story at the time that was published in one of the papers. Let me try to find it. It seems to paint it as a werewolf.
And just to say that like silver as a like weapon against supernatural things is like historically has a lot of like background to it. So it makes sense that like silver would also be applied to werewolves in the same way that it was applied to vampires and other like supernatural creatures.
Because which is kind of weird. You think gold would be more likely, because if you're using sympathetic magic, silver tarnishes but gold doesn't, so gold would be more pure. That's just my
who knows.
Okay, so there's a news story in one of the, I'm not sure if it's in the Courrier des Agenols or the French Gazette or one of the other broadsheets, because there's newspapers and there's also broadsheets, which are slightly different. But apparently a peasant encounters the beast that leaps over a river, I think it was, and then it turns around, stands up on hind legs, and speaks to the peasant and says, "Admit it, my friend, for an old man of 80 years, that's pretty good jumping." And then there's no further conversation. It runs off. So you have one story out there that like, no, it's talking, and it says for an old man of 80, implying that it's an old man and a werewolf.
Okay. So using our what is it, the
Agathidoscope.
agathidoscope. So the newspaper conflated the story. So it was a old hairy man jumped over a creek, looked at a person and went, pretty good for 80, and then scampered off.
Yes, but that was the Beast.
Okay.
Okay.
And it's like werewolves is like a thing. So there is I think it's been like combined into other so psychological diagnoses, but there was one that is like
lycanthropy.
Yeah, lycanthropy, where it's like you believe that you are a wolf, or specifically that you turn into a wolf. So like that is like something that is totally a thing that people can have.
And different than furries. Let's get that out there.
Yes, very different. But that still falls under people. So like maybe a person had this like kind of like psychological delusion. There's no way it could account for all of it.
It's too widespread. Which brings us to the most likely culprit, and which we're going to explore before getting back into the story, and that is, it's wolves, y'all. It's wolves.
It's probably wolves. And so, I mean, we can get down into like the Eurasian wolf. So again, they're kind of like 86 pounds is pretty average for wolves, but they can top out at over 150 and almost up to 175 is some of the records of like the largest animals. Big. And same measurement range of like 41 to 63 inches, like in terms of body length, and with a maximum shoulder height of about 33 inches. So big animal. And wolves have a very like extreme variation in color. So they can have like full melanism, albinism, and then also a word I learned while I was researching all of this, erythricism, so which is like a very red-brown coloration.
And the beast is described as having a red
coat. But they tend to be kind of a like tawny color where they have like their backs are darker than their stomachs, and so they
kind of like a German shepherd.
Yeah, that's pretty. I mean, you can just Google a picture of a wolf. Like that's kind of like they all look like that to an extent. And they're social animals, so they tend to live in mated pairs or like groups that are made up of mated pairs with their like older offspring. And wolf packs can get like anywhere from just being like 2 to like 6 animals, depending on young, but all the way up to, I think one of the records for the largest wolf packs is about 50. And wolf pack size is always dependent upon food availability. Mm-hmm. If there's enough food in an area, the wolves don't necessarily have to compete that hard with one another. But if food is very scarce, they want to like limit the competition in their area.
Which brings up a few things. One, going back quick to the color. So Gevaudan is in the southern part of France. It's still not quite to the Italian Alp border, but it's close enough that in recent times there have been Italian wolves that have crossed the Alps into France. And surprisingly, you don't think of wolves in Italy. You're like, Italy seems pretty developed. No, they got it. It's like California and mountain lions. So they got wolves.
Yeah, they do. So I've actually read papers where they were looking at
because they probably like coyotes in the same
to an extent, yeah. So they have a paper I read was about looking at rodenticide exposure in Italian wolves, and especially because as of a recent 2025 study, the Eurasian wolf population has increased by 60% over the last I think about 100 years is where they were looking at it, and so. Wolf populations are increasing because they're recolonizing areas that they once were in and that they were hunted out of, as well as they are readapting to human impacted environments. Mm-hmm. But still, even though wolves are recolonizing a lot of places and that their population has increased, average wolves contribute about 0.02% in all livestock deaths. So that's about 56,000 animals a year.
Yeah, I think we talked kind of similar stats with the alien big cats. Yeah. And even way back in our cattle mutilation episode, that the incidences of predation on livestock by large predators is pretty negligible when compared to other things that happen to livestock or loss of livestock, being like illness,
illness,
domestic animal attacks.
Yes.
Like domestic dogs are way more dangerous.
Yes.
Yeah. I brought up the Italian wolf also because Italian wolves apparently they have a higher incidence of that tawny red color
Oh, yeah.
in their population. And so if one of those came into the Gevaudan, it would stand out more because Gevaudan already has a big wolf problem.
Yeah.
In fact, all of France has a very big wolf problem at this time, which might have been why, like, early on, that first case, they referred to it as the Beast. That might have just been a catch-all term for wolves, because they were a common thing that attacked people. And remember, the 7 Years' War, as I said, was the first World War, really. And there were battlefields that happened completely on French soil where thousands of people were killed. Remember, you even said, what about those bodies, those people that get killed in battle? What happens to them? Well, in most cases, their corpses are left on the battlefield to be predated by birds and wolves.
Yeah.
And
wolves will absolutely scavenge.
And when food is prevalent, the numbers increase. So you have these battlefields of a lot of free food for wolves. So they start breeding. That war ends. Now you have these big packs of wolves who now need to like break up and disperse to find food. And they start moving into new regions or, so what I'm see where I'm going here is that like hungry wolves kind of increased in the region at this time.
And again, we can kind of like map that like, oh, people mean food association. And like where the wolves, if they were scavenging from battlefields, they like primarily those were like full grown adult men. It's just like, oh, there's a child.
This is easier.
Yeah, this is a lot easier. But also they are surrounded by a lot of sheep too, which sheep is very similar
already associated with prey.
Yeah, very similar to the primary like wild ungulate diet that most wolves have. And so like they could totally be going after.
And it's weird is that all this reading I did and research, you read about the people being attacked and killed by the beast, La Bête. They don't really seem to mention livestock being attacked or killed, which you think would be like also high if it's a bunch of wolves killing people. Well, what is the coincidence of livestock that are being taken?
That's a great question. And it's like,
well, maybe that doesn't stand out as much because of course livestock get taken by wolves, but a human is noteworthy.
Well, and it's also pretty common with like animals that are targeting livestock. So and this is like, if we're looking at, we're talking about like a pack animal, but mountain lions will also do it too. If there is a like livestock guardian dog or a llama or donkey who's like supposed to be protecting your like sheep, they'll target the livestock guardian dog, which is like typically why they want those animals to work in pairs or work in groups.
And they have big spiky collars sometimes.
Sometimes they do, but they want those animals to work cooperatively together to help protect the flock as well as protect each other. And so I would not surprise me that a wolf would look at a small child or young teenager and go, if I take you out, I can just have my pick of the flock of any of these sheep out here, like very easily.
And in a lot of these cases where there are no witnesses, it could be two wolves working together to take that person out. And maybe, in fact, they did then take some of the livestock, but they also took the person, and the person being killed overshadowed the fact that a lamb had been taken, or two.
And something that I also will point out is that killing livestock as a behavior in predatory animals, that's a learned behavior. So it's that association with, oh, livestock are a really easy meal. I don't have to work that hard. They're often like fairly contained in one area. So mom and dad learn that, and then mom and dad teach pups that they can do that too. So it's a learned behavior, and it's not necessarily something that you can like, if you target the animals who are primarily doing it, it will stop for a time, but then more animals will move into that area, and then they'll learn that as well.
Okay, I think you just perfectly set us up to jump back into the story with that. That's a perfect segue back in. Okay, so pretty early on in 1764, the monarchy and everybody involved is pretty much like, yeah, it's wolves. It's totally wolves. But now everybody expects it to be a monster. So we have to like find a way to kind of like shift the picture to wolves. So initially they contract a father and son hunting team. It's Jean-Charles de Enneval and his son, and they are from Normandy, which is like the north coast of France. The de Ennevals are renowned for being wolf hunters specifically. They claim to have killed thousands of, I think up to 6,000 wolves, and that they had basically purged Normandy of wolves. And so they're the perfect guys for the job. So they get like a royal contract in about February to go down to Gevaudan and start, getting involved, causing trouble in that bubble. And they get down there, and their big claim to fame is that they use dogs to hunt with. What a novel idea. Tracking dogs. Yeah. Hey, including like specifically bred bloodhounds that they have developed. These are their dogs. Somehow, when they arrive, they don't have the dogs with them, and they claim, oh, well, we couldn't secure a covered cart to bring the dogs here, so the dogs are coming later and separately, so we can't get started until our dogs get here. And they are also immediately rude to the local population. They refuse to speak the patois or even to like basically use interpreters. They expect everybody to come meet them on their level because we're sent here by the king. They start bossing and bullying people around, claiming that they have a letter signed by the king that says everybody has to listen to them, but they never show anybody the letter.
Great start.
In fact, Lafont says, hey, I want to see the letter. And the guy's like, okay, come here. And he like basically opens a briefcase from the way he tells stories. Like he opens a briefcase, there's some papers, and then he closes it real quick. There, you saw it. And he's like, I didn't see. I showed you. I did as much as I should. I don't have to show you anymore.
Yeah, you're doing the fake badge stunt. Where you're like, yeah, exactly. Here's my badge.
Yeah, pretty much. And so they immediately, like, the way they're described is rude. Repeatedly is bad-mannered and rude. And they hang around. They get there in February, and then they're still there late spring, getting into summer. They start being like, we can't do our job because that stupid Dragoon de Humel is still here. We need to get him out of here so that we can do what we want. And remember, he's the guy that's trying to recapture his masculinity. So he's on the defensive. Letters fly back and forth and move up the chain of command. And finally, by like late June, he is given the message, you've been dismissed. Like, your masculinity still in tatters, dude. Your honor fucking ruined. You didn't do a good job. We're gonna let this father-son team run the show now. So okay, so he's out of there. The father and son team at this point have been like talking a really big game, but every time they're gonna go hunt, it like rains or the weather's bad, and so they don't go and hunt. What's more is people will come to them and say like, there's just been an attack the next village over, like it just happened, like the guy just ran and told us, let's go check it out. And they go, no, we'll go in the morning. Or they'll send somebody there with their new scheme, which is go there to the body and put poison on it, and the wolf will come back to eat it, and that'll take care of it, and then we'll get there in due time. Earlier on, there had been a brief practice of actually leaving the corpses out to try and attract the predators back so they could ambush it. This didn't last long because the peasantry was starting to revolt. They were like, no, that is like, you are desecrating. It's bad enough you won't let them be buried in the churchyard.
Oh my God.
But like, let us have our loved ones' bodies back, So these guys start bringing back that technique, and that is angering people. And so, yeah, these things keep piling up on them, and eventually they get the boot as well. Enough is enough.
It sounds like they were running a con.
Pretty much. That is kind of what the consensus is, or the opinion of like the Comte de Moranger writes a letter further up to Saint Priest and says like, hey, yeah, these guys are conning us, like, completely, get them out of here. And they were only recommended because there's this other guy who I haven't even mentioned to this point, who is in Versailles, who's like the head of the king's household, and he gets to like make appointments. He's like the undersecretary, and he had like a real boner for these guys because he like loves stories of hunters' exploits, and so he had like bought into their con completely. The same guy was so into hunting that later he actually blows his own hand off with a gun while hunting.
Oh my
And then like,
god.
but then he gets like a really badass hook, and he actually like is like really cool with it and makes jokes about it, because he actually, like, to all accounts, even though he's like a fool, he's a really likable fool. So like he blows off his hand and people are like, oh, that's terrible. He goes, no, it's fine. It was my left hand. It was barely any use to me anyway. You know?
Well,
So
at least he has a good sense of humor about it, but still.
yeah.
Oh my god.
So in the backdrop of all this as well, early on, it was decreed that whatever the beast turned out to be and was whatever's killed has to be sent back to Versailles so they can show off the corpse. It needs to be taxidermied and put on display in the king's royal garden. So there's that other thing, is that like when they were inflating the legend of the beast and they knew they were making shit up, there's still this like thing in the back of their head. They're like, at some point the piper has to get paid. Like, we have to present something that lives up to the hype. So there's already that hanging over everybody's head. After those two hunters are dismissed, the crown cracks down on, like, there's the French Gazette out of Paris, which is much more aligned to state media, and they tell them, stop reporting on this. Like, we're going to sweep this under the rug. Just stop bringing it up, and we're going to let it play out, and eventually people are going to, like, mostly forget. But we got, like, one more card to play, which is they then send Jean-Francois Antoine, and he is the official bearer of the king's gun. Like, that's his title. He is the king's gun bearer. So his, like, you know, hired gunman. He is, like, whatever he kills, by extension, the king has killed by, you know, royal decree.
Definitely how that works.
So they send him now. He goes into the area, like, one last attempt. He takes a different tact when he gets there, which actually is like, he works more with the community. First of all, he bothers to speak the patois, and that immediately ingratiates him. Second, he sends back to Versailles, like, these people are in extreme poverty. You need to get them food. Like, you've been giving them alms already, but we need to do more. So he actually arranges for, like, food deliveries and actually just handing out money to the people.
Hell yeah, Antoine.
There's a mass being held by the Bishop of Mende. Antoine has his little hunting revenue. They're all made up of, like, the noble bad boys who like to hunt. And so he's like, no, here's what's going to happen, guys. Like, real talk. There's this, like, Saints' Day that's being celebrated by the bishop, which is weird because he's a Jansenist. He doesn't really like saints, but this particular saint is, like, the patron saint of the monarchy. So it's a national thing. He's like, so we're going to show up and in full military regalia, and we're going to participate in the mass, and we're going to march with the procession and hand out money to the people. So they're doing everything they can to get the public in the area, like, back on their side.
Yeah.
And become, like, part of the community. They also then, like, make a promise to everybody. They said, you know what? We're not going to ask any of you to come hunt with us or participate in any grand hunts unless it's on Sunday when you don't have any work to do, or a saint day when you don't have any work to do, or if it is absolutely imperative. Otherwise, leave it to us. We got this. You just do what you got to do and let us worry about keeping you safe. So, like, this immediately... Oh, he also throws a fireworks display, too. He's like, no, put a show on for the people. Like, literal bread and circus.
Wild. Wild that, like, being, like, anywhere remotely kind to the peasantry will immediately help ingratiate you into, like, the society with them. The bar is so low.
Privately, though, he talks a lot of shit about them. Like, in private letters, he's like, oh, God, these peasants are just... They're dumb, they're uneducated, they're superstitious, and whatever. But he at least is, like, making a public act of getting them on the side. And, but even then, it still takes him a few months. Like, he gets there in June, and it isn't until September that he finally has some success. Regardless of whether or not this is the actual beast or not, this is gonna be the beast, you know? Like, that's what's been, like, handed down from high up. It's like, whatever happens next, this is the end of the story. So they track the beast to an abbey where there's a bunch of nuns. So already perfect. The beast has come to prey on the nuns. We've got a religious aspect in here. He's like, I'm gonna be the hero. And the way the story is told is they flush it out of some bushes. He is walking down a path and it comes around the corner at him. He sees it face to face, at which point he says, it is an unusually large wolf. Without hesitation, because he's the king's gun, he raises his musket, which he is overloaded with 5 shots worth of powder, several steel balls, and a whole bunch of lead buckshot.
Jeez.
And he pulls the trigger. He says it throws him backwards through the air like a Hollywood movie because of how much overpowered it is. The main shot pierces the animal's right eye, and the other little smaller shot, peppers its front end, and the beast goes down. But then it gets up and starts to come towards him, at which point one of his hunting party runs to his aid and fires another shot, and it kills the beast. It's apparently a very large wolf. I mean, but it's still within the realms of like what you described. The size is not very unusual.
175 pounds.
Yeah. It is, it's got a darker color to its back, so it meets that kind of part of the story. And immediately they're like, okay, this is the beast, we need to send it back. He doesn't accompany it back. He says, because he has to be like heroic and sell the legend, he says, I am going to stay here to hunt down its children, because it probably had pups. So, like, consider the beast dead, but I'm going to be here to do cleanup. He sends it, I think, with his son to Versailles. He gives instructions on how to taxidermy it, and they don't follow his instructions at all. He actually gives specific instructions where he says, when you skin it, you're going to have to stretch the skin over a wooden mold or frame. Make the frame slightly bigger, because as the skin desiccates, it's going to shrink, and it's not going to give a true portrayal of the real size of the beast. Right? So he's already giving instructions on, like, make it bigger.
I've taxidermied things. Yes, there is shrinkage, but not that much shrinkage.
He gives other special instructions on, like, he's like, skin it right away, stuff it with straw. The guy who, like, gets it decides, no, I'm going to let the people at Versailles do their job, so I'm going to pump it full of some kind of embalming fluid of my own design. By the time it gets to Versailles, the thing is basically putrefying. Ugh. So they do, like, a cover-up job where they try to, like, put it back together, and they put it on display for members of the court to come and see. And they're not impressed. It's kind of like, that's it. That is the thing that has been terrorizing. But the king still is, like, really gung-ho about it and talks it up like, oh, look at this thing. It's way bigger. Like, I could totally hear him like, this is the biggest wolf that's ever been killed in France. I ordered it killed.
This is the biggest wolf that's ever been in France. This is like the greatest. Yeah. This is the greatest act I've ever done as king. This impression is shit.
You think it's small, but look, if you look at the Sharpie line I drew around it, it's way bigger. So that's kind of what happens. Sure enough, like the wolf attacks kind of cease for a bit. And so Antoine is like, all right, my job here is done. And he leaves. Everything's quiet for about 2 months. So now, like, we are into, like, December, heading on into January of 1766, right? People start getting attacked again.
Yep.
But that's like you said, right? You take care of one, and it just takes a little bit of time before something else fills that void.
Yeah.
Or they start picking up the behavior again. So it starts happening again. And at this point, steps up another hero of the story who isn't reported on because the official case is closed. As far as Versailles is considered and the papers are considered, it's over. It's done. We are not going to offer rewards anymore for things like this because in the meantime, other provinces started to have wolf attacks very similar to the Beast of Gevaudan. And they're like, look, we can't just start offering up, 10,000 livre rewards everywhere. We have our own lavish parties and lifestyle to uphold. We can't be doing this. And there's a bunch of other shit that's happening that's like the early fermentation of the revolution is happening. So a few months later, in early 1767, this guy, Jean Chastel, who is a local minor nobleman, he actually had run afoul of Antoine directly when he had played a prank on one of like Antoine's men, where they told the guy that an area was fine to ride his horse through, and then he immediately sank in a bog up to like the horse's withers, and they all laughed at him. But he claims that like he almost drowned, and so it's like a big affront. And then everybody's pointing muskets at each other. And then Antoine shows up and is like, no. And then he orders Chastel and like his two brothers to be locked up. And so they are actually imprisoned until he leaves.
Jeez.
Once he leaves and they're free, they go out and they're like, hey, the wolves are still attacking people. And so Jean Chastel ends up shooting one more big wolf. The wolf that Antoine had killed didn't appear to have any signs of having eaten human flesh. There were no bones or anything in it. Although they said actually there might have been some pieces of cloth, but there was a suspicion that they had rammed it down the dead animal's throat with a stick to make it seem like it had eaten someone.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently, in the animal that Chastel kills, there does appear to be human bones in its stomach contents. But again, this isn't just one animal that's doing it. So he tries to take this animal to Versailles to get his reward, and they laugh him out of court and tell him to get lost because the beast is already dead. You know?
Yeah.
So, tough luck. But, however, in Gevaudan, he becomes the real hero of the story. Even though wolf attacks continue for a bit, but they start to decrease. They said between April 1766 and March 1767, 99 wolves are killed in Gevaudan. And after they put that much of a dent in the population, lo and behold, the killings kind of start to stop. Meanwhile, back in Versailles, they have adopted a new, like a conspiracy of silence in a way, where it's like, we're not going to talk about the beast anymore. That's silly. We don't want people to know like how we kind of fell for this, like this mass hysteria. So we're just going to kind of ignore it. And then beyond that, we're going to start a government program across France of mass poisonings for wolves. And so they realize they reframe it as like, this is a national wolf problem. We need to get rid of the wolves. It's not beasts. It's not, it's like, no, we just have a really bad infestation and we need to get the public educated on it and participating in this mass program of poisons. And the poison recipes are all crazy. I think it's the first time where they start using strychnine.
Oh,
but
yeah.
like one of the ways of doing it, they say, kill a dog, let it sit under a pile of horse manure for a few days, and then pump it full of strychnine. And for some reason, the smell of the rotting dog horse shit combo will attract the wolves. I don't know. There was also one guy who, at the height of the beast, had written to the Comte de Moranger and said, hey, I have a plan. We need to fight it with witchcraft. So I've concocted this crazy magical spell involving rubbing ourselves with horse shit and like drinking this magic potion and then putting feathers in our hair. And if we go out, we'll find the beast. Yeah, obviously they didn't do that. One thing that they did do, though, Duhamel actually had his soldiers dress as women.
Yeah.
But they like went and hung out with the shepherdesses and just like spent the day hanging out in the fields with like the people in the flocks dressed as women. And that didn't really work. It was also suggested that they could take a young lamb, dress it in women's clothing, and then tie it upright to a stake. And so it looks like a woman, so it might get attacked. That, contrary to what one fuzzy little puppet professor might tell you, did not happen. It was suggested and had been done in other provinces, but was not actually done in Gevaudan.
Interesting. It's, I mean, this, I think I could do a solid, like 2.5 hours on the history of like the violent
We're
removal.
nearing 2.5 hours.
I know we are. The violent removal of like predators from the environment and how like it works because you got rid of predators, but you've also like incredibly harmed the environment because wolves are, as like a species, are one of those like keystone species. They're really important because they do a lot of work in terms of like keeping the larger herbivore populations down, so then it allows foliage to actually bloom. And so like the when wolves were reintroduced into Yellowstone, you could actually see there was a marked decrease in elk and deer populations, and then a decrease in coyote populations, an increase in fox populations, and an increase in beaver populations as well. Because the wolves put pressure back on the coyotes, also lessened the population of elk and deer, and that allowed for more small game to come back, as well as for the beavers to come back, because the trees could grow bigger because they weren't just getting mowed down by the deer and the elk.
Yeah.
So wolves are super important to the environment.
And I think also in another component in the Yellowstone case was that in addition to the beavers just making ponds, which encouraged fish to spawn in there, the increased vegetation along the waterways also provided cover for fish along the banks.
Yeah.
And that the salmon population increased.
There's a lot of lots of ins and outs and what have yous, because you don't know, to an extent it is a little bit of the butterfly effect. It's what happens.
It's like a
if
kaleidoscope.
I do this? Yeah. What happens if I do this? And you don't necessarily know until it's actually happened, and then you can see how it just decreases and everything, and then you let it come back. Yeah.
So in the ultimate, the end, what do we learn here? What is the point of the Beast of Gevaudan? Is that later on, it becomes framed as just an example of, how stupid peasants were at the time. That becomes during the 19th century, that is the way people look back on it, especially post-revolution, is that this was purely a case of uneducated people who didn't know they were being attacked by wolves, which is stupid because it's an animal that's already part of their environment and they are well familiar with. And then later, even in the 1880s, there's a few more Catholic, there's a pope that starts changing some stuff in the church. And so the beast gets brought up again by people who are criticizing the pope for being lax. Hey, if you do this, the Beast of Gevaudan's going to come back.
Oh my God.
I also forgot when it was happening in Paris. People started calling political opponents and people they didn't like the Beast derogatorily. So Catherine the Great, who, as we learned in that Dig for Bones segment, started a school for non-noble women, which was pretty noteworthy. She's referred to as the Beast by people.
God forbid you educate women.
Which is funny. She started that the year before. She actually started the first university for noble women. And then the following year, she's like, yeah, I guess the peasant girls need to learn too. So she started a university for them. And then her successor, the next male czar, did away with both of them.
Of course. You can't have educated women. We cause problems.
We'll also let that be just an indication that, progress made is usually undone by the despot who comes in after.
Yeah, it's true.
But the idea that this was some uneducated population that was purely responsible, as we just showed, was not the case.
No.
This is an interconnected web of self-serving nobles, political actors, capitalists trying to make money off news stories and sell a paper. You've got emasculated men who are trying to
trying to save face, trying to make themselves feel better,
make France great again.
Oof. Oof.
Yeah. So these are all these things that are at play that in the intervening years have the context that explains everything and is the key is lost. So now you have people today who will share the story of the Beast of Gevaudan and they bring it up as this is an example of some kind of supernatural monster that couldn't be caught, and that science tried to tell you was wolves, but the real truth is far more magical and paranormal, because it is a staple of modern paranormal sphere. It is part of the pantheon of cryptids and monsters. Is the Beast of Gevaudan, and is always the case. And I feel this is what the agathidoscope might be redundant, because it's always going to come up with the same answer. It's man. It's always fucking human beings doing stupid shit that humans do.
Well,
and blaming it on, or interpreting natural phenomenon in the way that humans do.
and also just conflating events to try and save like any amount of face or to turn a profit. I mean, that's like that was seen with all the Warren cases of like, because one of the chilling quotes that you do in that episode is that the Conjuring house, there we go, I remembered. The Conjuring house, where like the biographer guy that they had who would come in and like write the book afterwards, where he was just like, I can't get a straight story out of like anybody, and then Ed Warren goes, well, they're all crazy. That's the only people who we work with are just the crazies. Punch up the story, make it sound good, make it sell.
And the people who are involved will later change their story to align with the official one because it's getting them the attention. So I personally think that we are very close to having a new Beast of Gevaudan is going to show up somewhere in America. There's going to be some kind of scapegoat soon because we are hitting the same societal pressures, especially when the tariffs take effect and food becomes scarce. People are losing their jobs and you have that stress. And it's always in times of great societal stress when monster stories in these events happen, or at least the spark. So, we have this looming threat of like a monarchy. We have an oligarchy that is exploiting us. We have a press that is changing the truth to sell papers and make money and push their own narratives. We have a whole bunch of really fragile masculinity and toxic masculinity at play. A lot of people who refuse to be wrong and have to save face. And we have this idea of like a threat. There's a threat against our way of life. There's a threat against, our people. Look at like how the way that the political right will parade out the family members of people who are seemingly victims of, for example, an immigrant killed their daughter. Now we're going to bring her up on stage and make them a martyr and a symbol. In the same way, this mother fought the beast and lost her child. Shouldn't we be celebrating her? It's the same fucking shit in a new package. The agathidoscope is now, if we turn it on what's happening today, you will find the same myriad of causes and little minutia in context that collectively build up where we're at.
Yeah, except unfortunately, it will not be an animal that is causing the problem, quote unquote, the problems. It's trans people. It's immigrants.
Immigrants.
It is
the most vulnerable people in our society.
Yeah,
people we send out to tend the flock.
Those are the people that are being targeted, that are being like attacked constantly, and it is vile and disgusting. And we hey, unproblematic opinion to say that the harm against trans and the trans community and the immigrant community is disgusting and foul, and that they are being treated horribly.
And, a beast attack on one is a beast attack on all. And so I think that's the takeaway, that why this episode is so long, why there's so much, we went into like minutia in context that did not directly seem to be related to the beast, is it's a lesson. That's one thing that Least Haunted strives to do, is to teach you, the audience, and give you these tools that you can learn from these historical examples and see how things can be changed and twisted and warped through folklore, retelling, people's personal agendas. And then that gets picked up by somebody completely different for a whole new purpose.
Yeah.
So that's what I've got. And do you want to do a corner?
Well, do you want me to take us to the classroom?
We can go to the classroom. Man, this will be our longest episode yet. But it's good. It's good.
There's just so much, though, is the problem. Is like, that's like, because it's really like, it's how everything is framed. And it's like, at the very heart of it, it is horrible things happening to the most vulnerable population. And then everyone above that trying to take their place and make their name and make something out of it that benefits them. That's the story. But anyways, welcome to Carolyn's classroom. This is my chalkboard.
No Garth's Corner this time.
No Garth's
We have
Corner.
this
I'm
instead.
not musically inclined. I'm a tired grad student. You have to stare at a chalkboard with me because that's what I do so much these days. So Cody mentioned it earlier, the dire wolves as being kind of one step removed from our modern day wolves. And so on April 7th, 2025, the news was released that a company called Colossal Biosciences, in quotes, resurrected 3 extinct dire wolves. The company says that with the success of the dire wolves, that they want to de-extinct the woolly mammoth. Okay, de-extinct also in quotes. The woolly mammoth, the Tasmanian tiger, and the dodo. The company also says that this is not an attempt to make a Jurassic Park-like zoo, but they want to reintroduce these extinct species back into the areas they once inhabited. And
that's probably not going to go over so well because people won't even take living species back in the areas they used to inhabit.
I will get into that. And now I'm going to put on my skepticals. So first and foremost, the dire wolves they made, they're not dire wolves. They're gray wolves that have had 20 genes edited to make them look more like dire wolves. So the genes they edited were specifically in terms of fur color as well as like size. So that's what they were manipulating. And so any dire wolf DNA that's been recovered has been really degraded, and so they don't necessarily have this full complete genome that they can work with, that they can then manipulate an already living like animal's genome to make look like it, because theoretically they'd have to be adding genes into it. And so while gray wolves are the closest living relative to dire wolves, their closest
is a relative term.
Their closest common ancestor existed 2.5 to 6 million years ago. So that's a really long time.
For comparison, Lucy, the Australopithecus, that's like one of our earlier ancestors, that's like Australopithecus is like around 3 million to 2.5 million years ago.
Yeah.
So at the same time, the last common ancestor between humans and chimps is 7 million years ago.
Yeah.
So this is all to say, the gray wolf and the dire wolf, not very close at all.
No. Like, while the company said that they don't want to make zoos, they don't want to make Jurassic Park, like, what do they mean that they want to reintroduce these animals into the wild? So
because it's a brand new species they invented. It's not even a real animal.
Yeah.
Well, it's real, but it's not like from there.
And also like this, it was like the whole process of like developing the dire wolves and inserting the embryo into because they used dogs to like gestate
fill in
the
the
embryos. No, they used dogs to gestate the embryos.
Oh,
they still had to perform a C-section
because of that
the size difference. Yeah, potentially. And so like they still had to like human intervention the entire way for this whole process. And
because morphological species, they don't.
So so back to like, they don't want the dire wolves to go into a zoo. They want them to be reintroduced. So in California, as an example, since I am a California wildlife biologist, we've already had a hard enough time with wolves reintroducing themselves to California. There have been huge conflicts between wolves reintroducing themselves to California and then the conflicts that are arising with ranchers, with suburbs, just with people in general, of wolves coming back into California. So what does that mean when dire wolves are approximately 25% bigger than gray wolves? Like, what does that mean for ranchers and farmers and hunters, that this larger animal is moving back into the environment that they will then have to compete with, in quotations, for the same prey as well as to protect their livestock?
We also don't know the behavior of these animals.
Exactly.
We assume that they might be pack hunters like gray wolves because that's our nearest analogy, and we base a lot of that off of just dire wolves that we find in La Brea tar pits.
Yeah.
We're like, oh well, there's a whole lot of them here, so they must have been traveling around together, and they must be scavenging
That is,
But we don't know.
that leads into my next point of like, without human intervention, how are these animals supposed to survive in the wild? Like, how are they going to learn how to hunt and survive in a natural environment? Like, typically,
And the animals that they would hunt aren't around anymore either.
Yeah. Typically when we're doing translocation, so I brought up Yellowstone. So those wolves that were brought back in, they had them live within pens for a while so that they could become acclimated with the new environment that they are in. So these are animals that were taken from the wild and brought into a new space. So they still have to have an acclimation period of time to become comfortable in their new environment. So we have to like turn that up to like 1,000 to have animals who don't have any like parents to teach them how to hunt and survive. So how are they supposed to learn unless we are having them learn from gray wolves? But then that also will potentially cause conflicts because will they be able to interbreed with the gray wolves?
Yeah.
Which technically they would be, because they are gray wolves who have just had a few genes moved around.
Yeah.
So they could interbreed with them. So then dire wolves aren't necessarily a thing. We've just created a new wolf hybrid.
Or like a subspecies of gray wolf.
Yeah. And it's like really just like not well thought out through. And then like also going back into like they want to bring back the woolly mammoth. So the woolly mammoth, their primary cause of extinction was the natural climate change that occurred and the resulting habitat fragmentation that occurred after. So
and inbreeding.
And so that's that habitat fragmentation. So now we have these animals who are only like locked in on these very specific places, and their only option is to breed with each other. And so that causes inbreeding deficits, which cause declines in population. So how are we supposed to bring back woolly mammoths in light of human-driven climate change? We don't necessarily have the areas that they could be able to live and exist on. And the dodo, another example of their extinction, was directly caused by humans and the animals that they brought onto the islands that they once inhabited.
And those animals that we brought in are still there. So if you put them back there, they're just going to get wiped out the same way.
Again, what is preventing their extinction after reintroduction from happening again? And then the Tasmanian tiger, so they went extinct on Australia due to direct competition with dingoes. And then while on Tasmania, their extinction was caused by hunting in order to protect domestic sheep, as well as infections from novel diseases brought to Tasmania by colonizers, as well as the habitat loss that the colonizers then caused from creating greater areas for their sheep to graze on, as well as developing like houses and cities. So back to that point, how are we supposed to prevent that from happening?
Yeah.
And what comes down to like primarily my feelings with this whole like redevelopment of extinct species, and especially like what we're talking about is megafauna. So when we're thinking of like saber-toothed tigers, the woolly mammoth, dire wolves, those are our big megafauna. Why can't we use this technology to improve the breeding programs and to increase genetic diversity in species that are beginning to go extinct?
Yeah, it should be a preventative thing and not after the fact. Because it also sets up this idea that it doesn't matter how badly we fuck up the environment. We don't need to change our habits and what we're doing because we can just bring them back.
Exactly. And it really lends us to not learning a lesson about like how we treat the environment and how we treat the species we share the environment with. And I'm going to quote paleogeneticist who he was quoted in the articles I read, Dr. Nick Rollins from Otago University. If we don't have extinction, how are we going to learn from our mistakes? Is the message now that we can go and destroy the environment and that animals can go extinct, but we can bring them back? And I think that is a shit lesson to learn.
Yeah. No. What these people have done is they've made designer pets. Conspicuous consumption designer pets for rich people is what they're going to be.
Oh, absolutely.
Ultimately, that is the goal. Because, like you said, you can't release these into the wild. There's too many things in the way to do so. Not just like all the reasons you listed, but then just people pushing back.
Back to like it being a designer pet. Like the main thing that they were talking about in like the press release from, again, Colossal Biosciences.
Yeah.
I'm judging the name because it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But Colossal Biosciences was directly like saying, just like the direwolves from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And it's like
which are not direwolves either.
They're not direwolves. They're wolf dogs.
Yeah.
And it's like,
and as they're portrayed in the books, is also way bigger than real world direwolves were too.
Yeah.
Direwolves were only a few percentage points bigger than the modern wolf. They're still the biggest canine ever.
25% was the average I was finding with like how much bigger they were than like modern day wolves. Yeah. And they're really like they were really selling it. It's like this is Jon Snow's. This is Jon Snow's.
To the
like,
point that
dog.
they named
this is Ghost, and like and
they named one of them Khaleesi.
No, they're I think I can pull up like what they're actually called because I
think they did name one Khaleesi. There we go, found it. Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi.
Yeah, and Romulus and Remus are what is it? They are
the mythical founders of Rome, the two brothers.
Yes.
And they were
raised by wolves.
Yeah, by a she-wolf, an Italian
wolf. And it's not interesting. It's not biologically helpful. And it's just like we could just be really improving the genetic diversity of our captive breeding programs with this. And I think that is much more valuable for this science. But it's not flashy, it's not sexy, and it will not make Colossal Biosciences any money. That's it.
Just like wolves attacking peasants doesn't sell papers.
Yeah, it doesn't sell papers, doesn't reestablish your masculinity. You just have to help people by making sure that they have enough food to live and that they don't have to stand in the middle of like fucking nowhere with their sheep to then be attacked by a wolf that wants their sheep.
Yeah, I think that's the whole moral of the story. Both of these things is just fucking be decent to other people. God damn it, is it that hard?
The bar is so low.
It's so low. And
it's so low.
They'd somehow just limbo lower and lower.
But yeah, that's my chalkboard.
Yay! They're not dire wolves.
They're not dire wolves. And it's not interesting, and it's not a breakthrough.
Okay, well, Carolyn, thank you so much for coming back on. I think this might end up being our longest episode in a very long time.
I'm glad I could poke the Cody bear into this like very long conversation that turned into something incredibly complex than I think we were even joking about like last week.
I want to take some time to thank our patron producers. Without whom this wouldn't be happening. I mean, it probably would, but not on the same level. The squaddies are Travis Alexander, By Barbarian, Rachel Krieger, Tom Dahl, Justin Duckham, Kelly Flynn, Gunnar Franks, Carla Harrington, Havelock, Christina Hurley, The New Jared, Ken with 2 N's, TJ Levenhagen, Alicia Overton, Jordan Ramey, a different one, but the same one. I forgot to say that last time, so I have to remind. Last time I just said Jordan Ramey, but it was also a different one, but the same one. Blue Roan, Seti Fan, and Tatum. Thank you, Monster Squadron. If you want to support the Least Haunted podcast, you can go to patreon.com/leasthaunted. We got tiers, we got things. I'm working on some new prizes that are going to be going out real soon to patrons, so keep an eye on your mailbox. Speaking of mailbox, you can send something to us. We have a P.O. Box, Box 22, Redwood Estates, California, 95044. We've got some letters from Jeff the Mongoose recently, and a spoiler for next time, We've gotten more, but I have to wait for Garth to come back to properly open the mail because it's addressed to both of us. But yeah, there has been more development on that front. So keep those things coming to any cryptids out there. Jeff, we love the letters. Keep them coming. But like Mothman, Bigfoot, if you're out there and listening, send us mail. All that out of the way. You got anything you want to plug or shout out?
So, to plug, keep fighting fascism, keep protecting our trans brothers and sisters, our siblings, and keep protecting our immigrant communities.
Yeah.
Because collectively, together, we can beat the fascists. And the Nazis always got to lose, right? They always got to get punched in the face by Indiana Jones. So, together, we're going to beat them. So, keep fighting. We got this.
Yeah. Be the rock in the shoe of fascism. All right. Until next time, remember, the only thing that's haunted
is
you. Oh, a nice wolf howl. I like it. All right.
Say goodbye.
Beware the beast!
It turns out it's man.